Well, we're getting started. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. We're very happy to present Anthony Birch to you. I really doubt you don't know if you're here, but just so you do know, he was the head writer for Borderlands 2, and he also is co-creator with his sister for Hey Ash, What You Playing. Pretty awesome. If you don't know it, just check it out. Basically, he's going to be talking about comedy and what he does and how he does it. So, not wasting more time.
Cool. So just to get this out of the way, I'm bad at everything. This talk's gonna be like 15 minutes, it's gonna be super meandering, it's gonna be weird, and then I'm gonna rely on you to give me like cool questions for the next 2 hours to justify my presence here. And I'll just do Korra reenactments and shit. Okay, so my talk is called Dying is Funny, Comedy is Easy. My name is Anthony Birch, and I've worked in video games for around 6 years, 3 of them as a critic for Destructoid.com. I reviewed a lot of games. I was their features editor. One person read it. And another 3 as a writer at Gearbox Software. I was the lead writer for Borderlands 2. Today, I'm going to try to link Jonathan Blow's design philosophy with the word boner farts, and you are going to come away from this talk certain that I'm an enormous asshole. So this talk is called Dying is Funny, Comedy is Easy, which is A, perversion of Mel Brooks' famous Dying is Easy, Comedy is Hard quote, and B, a super fucking douchey thing to say because comedy isn't easy. Comedy is based on subversion of expectations, and the more you tell one particular kind of joke, the more expected that kind of joke becomes, and therefore the less funny it is. Therefore, must constantly shift and mutate in an effort to surprise its audience in different ways. It's kind of like the metagame in a MOBA. If the community runs 2-1-2 lane placements long enough that everyone gets a pretty good idea how to counter it, eventually the metagame shifts so that 1-1-2 becomes more common, or 3-1-1 or whatever. Similarly, it's really hard to laugh at a Laurel and Hardy short anymore because we've come so immune to the charms of watching people fall on their butts while shrugging at the camera in an aw shucks kind of way. We've learned that pattern of humor, and it stopped being surprising, and comedy therefore had to change. Obviously, some comedy is timeless. Douglas Adams and the Marx Brothers are still funny no matter what. But comedy on the whole tends to age much, much worse than other genres and art forms. I'll honestly be very surprised if Borderlands 2's comedy is still remotely amusing to anyone in 50 years, maybe 15, I don't know, just as I'd be surprised if high-level LOL meta didn't change in the next 5. Basically what I'm saying is Katarina's OP, please rebalance. Now, I bring all this up because if comedy's #1 enemy is repetition and familiarity, then that puts video games in a really good space for comedy, because most video games simply aren't funny. And I don't mean that they try and fail, I mean that they don't even try, period, most of the time. So I talked to Davey Redden, who's the creator of the Stanley Parable, which is a mod for Half-Life 2 that is out in a free version, and there's a more fleshed out version coming out soon that's going to be really good. And he pointed out how odd it is that comedies aren't a genre of game. Horror is a genre of game. Romance is a genre of game. Action is a genre of game. We often talk about how much video games have so much untapped potential in terms of making the player feel despair or sadness or love, but I'd argue that comedy is equally unexplored territory. For a totally unscientific example, let's look at someone's Steam library. Let's look at my Steam library. So I own 444 games on Steam because I'm irresponsible and have no children. And of those 444, only 57 include what I'm going to arbitrarily call a non-trivial amount of comedy, either through gameplay or through dialogue. The games I categorized here go from something like Surgeon Simulator 2013, which is fucking hilarious entirely because of its gameplay. Does everybody know what this is? Do you know what this game is? Yes. Well done. To something like Left 4 Dead, which I tossed in purely because the protagonists occasionally like tell jokes. The gameplay isn't actually funny, but like sometimes Zoe will say a funny thing about aliens or whatever. So 57 out of 444. That means only about 13% of the games that I own include a notable amount of comedy, and I'm being super bullish on what defines comedy, and I'm also someone who goes out of his way to find and play comedy. So why don't we have more comedy games? I don't know. I can't say for sure. Maybe because comedy is risky. If a joke fails, that can make an entire room of people fall silent, whereas if a badass one-liner fails, like in a Gears of War game or something like that, you can kind of like grit and get through it. It's not really that big of a deal. Maybe because people think of comedy as being really, really difficult, because it is. But at the same time, it's not that difficult. It's not harder to do in video games than tragedy or badassedness, and in my opinion, it's a lot easier. Most video games are inherently funny. Their gameplay is based around things that are either really surprising or really crazy and over the top, and that kind of just naturally makes you laugh. So when you fall into a spike trap in Spelunky when you didn't expect to, you laugh. Everybody plays Spelunky, right? You should all play Spelunky. When you hit a pedestrian with a car in Grand Theft Auto, when that pedestrian flies into a hot dog cart, and when the hot dog cart then explodes for no reason, you laugh. When you build a little fort made out of vending machines so that nobody can see you hack a terminal in Deus Ex Human Revolution, you laugh. When the AI looks stupid or something unexpected happens, or when you do something so clever that you seemingly trivialize huge swaths of the game, you laugh. But in many cases, the stories of these kinds of games want us to take them really seriously. We used to have a phrase to describe this kind of inconsistency. It rhymed with ludonarrative kissonance. But for some reason, saying it these days discredits your entire argument, so I'm just not going to say that. In a 2008 lecture entitled Conflicts in Game Design, Jonathan Blow, creator of Braid and The Witness, said the following: "Story games are inherently conflicted. People can sense a conflicted work. It won't strike them deeply. Disharmonious, it won't resonate. How can we remove the conflict?" Now, he was talking specifically about how authored meaning and dynamic meaning work against each other. He wasn't talking specifically about tonal consistency, but I still think the point is relevant even if we're just talking about tone. So here's another slide from that same talk. These screenshots are from the first Deus Ex game, and he uses an example of how player agency can sort of sabotage what you're trying to do in a tonal point of view. So this is J.C. Denton is the main character, the dude with the sunglasses, and he is talking to Jamie Reyes in this bottom left-hand image about how the government might have poisoned the poorest people in America to like gain control in the Illuminati, and they're talking in these really, really gruff voices. And all the while, there's a big fucking American flag right between them that the player just picked up and placed down there because he thought it'd be funny. So all these really dramatic cutscenes have an American flag just sort of waving in the wind, just arbitrarily, really undermining the entire tone of those scenes. Blow then went on to talk about how art games like Jason Rohr's Gravitation deal with this conflict of dynamic meaning versus authored meaning, and how something like Gravitation or something like Passage imbues its basic mechanics with symbolic meaning, and that's how they get around that sort of problem. Blow has a lot of different solutions to the problem, all of them super, super intelligent. My solution for this problem, or at least one solution, is the following: boner farts. So this is a screenshot from a quest we did in Borderlands 2. Really goofy, really immature. Long story short, this zoologist guy, Sir Hammerlock, wants to come up with a better name for these creatures called bullymongs, and through a bunch of different misadventures, he gets really sick and tired of picking up new names, and he goes, fuck it, let's call them boner farts. Can I curse?
Yes.
Hooray. And the reason that Borderlands 2 has a quest about boner farts instead of a quest about saving dying children set to violin music or something like that is because Borderlands 2's gameplay is inherently funny. I'm going to show you a trailer for the original Borderlands before it underwent a massive art style change and shift in tone. But first we're going to watch an advertisement for Call of Duty Ghosts. Fuck you.
Why have you come here? Only fools and criminals come to this planet. This is a dangerous place. If the bandits don't get you, the wildlife will. You won't last long here. Not without help. Not without guns. A hell of a lot of guns. Why have you come here? You're looking for the vault, aren't you? You won't find it. I'll tell you the same thing I told all those who came before you. It doesn't exist.
Okay, so it's pretty serious stuff. And now I'm going to show you a trailer for Borderlands 2. Yeah. No, fuck you. No! All right, we're just doing chorus shit. Fuck it. Sorry, just a second. This is going to be good. This is fine. We're fine. Everything's fine. And just waste everybody's time and ruin everything. All right. So I didn't work on the first Borderlands, so this might all come off as hearsay. But I think Randy Pitchford and Brian Martell are on record in a bunch of places as basically saying that before the art style change, Borderlands took place in a fairly serious universe. Fuck you! Actually, I should probably silence my phone. I'm a hypocrite. Once the gameplay got more fleshed out, though, and it became clear that the more over-the-top mechanics like setting a dude on fire or melting a dude's face off with lightning and stuff, when it became clear that those were the really fun mechanics, the old tone and the old art style didn't match the more over-the-top direction of the actual game design. Once the gameplay, after the story gained characters like Tannis and Crazy Earl and Scooter, the story's emotions felt a lot more in parity with the gameplay's emotions. The game made you laugh, and so the story did too. And this is why I want to see more comedy games. As so many modern AAA games are about empowering the player to a positively batshit degree, and because being batshit powerful is inherently kind of funny, comedy can often be a better fit for these sorts of games than tragedy or high drama. This is a man with a gun that has a chainsaw in it, chopping up an alien. That's fucking funny. And if someone walked around Borderlands 2 holding around an American flag, it wouldn't actually feel all that out of place for the world that we created. Like, it'd feel a little bit weird, but not that weird. And not only that, but comedy comes with its own set of advantages. People are really willing to forgive weird shit if it makes them laugh. There's a bit in the Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep expansion that we did, where we needed the player to blow up a couple of blimps outside of the main starting village. They're kind of irrelevant to the story. We just wanted you to do something that was visually interesting, something that changed the state of the environment, and something that gave you some gameplay thing to do after you showed up to our main town. So I was trying to figure out why the player narratively needed to do this. Are they like scared of the blimps? Is there something bad in the blimps? Is there something they need in the blimps, but then that has to come back later in the story and they might not even remember about the blimps like 2 minutes after they destroy them? All the reasons I came up with were just kind of shitty and I didn't like them. So instead I did this. So that's a complete cheat that's completely lazy and unfair, but it kind of worked. You can't do that all the time, but I think the people who laughed at that moment sort of forgave the fact that there was really no logical reason to destroy those blimps other than Mr. Torg said so. I think if you didn't laugh, that the whole section of the game is kind of irritating, but if you did laugh, yay, everything's fine. Humor also allows you to do really crazy things that can result in much cooler gameplay. Everyone that's already laughing is cool because you know what that is. If anyone in this room hasn't played Saints Row 4, oh my god, play Saints Row 4. It is one of the best sandbox games ever made, period. So this is the dubstep gun from Saints Row 4. And it probably goes without saying that this gun would not exist in a more serious game. But in addition to the fact that it's just plain funny, the way it works is you just shoot it at enemies, or really anybody, because it's Saints Row. Bunch of wub lasers come out, and then the people start dancing and twerking until they die. In addition to how funny that is inherently, it's also interesting gameplay-wise. Because it does, and I believe this is accurate, and I'm not shitting you, because it does damage per wub, and because the firing rate varies based on where the song is, just sort of in its runtime, the gun is actually really, really shitty at the beginning as the song is like sort of getting up before the big drop, and then in the middle it gets really good once all the wubs hit, and at the end of the song it's a little bit shittier because the firing rate slows down a little bit. That's a really small thing, but it's directly connected to the joke of the idea that this is a gun that shoots dubstep music, and it actually changes the way you use the gun. Whereas a machine gun or a pistol, you might pop a bunch of different people, just sort of headshot each one of them. The dubstep gun requires you to sort of keep on your target and keep there for a while, even while the song is warming up, and you actually have to think about the cooldown of the wubs and all that shit. Like, it's actually really interesting and funny, and it came from a desire just to sort of be a gag and make the player laugh, but more gameplay consequences arose because of it. I also think that some game designers might be worried that comedy is too financially risky, that people, when you think of Joe consumer, I guess, that they want to be heroes and badasses and blah, but not the protagonists of a laugh-a-minute yuck fest, like nobody wants to be Steve Martin in The Jerk kind of thing. Which, I don't know, maybe. Like, Call of Duty certainly does pretty well, and it's about as funny as puppies dying or an episode of The Big Bang Theory. But But Portal did pretty well, and Team Fortress 2 did pretty well. And Cliff Bleszinski may say that Saints Row turns him off because it's got dildo bats in it, but there have been 4 Saints Row games. It's pretty damn rare for an open world franchise to get 4 installments, just given how difficult they are to produce. There aren't 4 Crackdown games. There aren't 4 True Crime Streets of LA games. But there are 4 games where you're given money for flinging your body into traffic and seeing how badly you can injure yourself. Now, like I said at the top of the talk, comedy is hard, but it's not the hardest thing in the world. How many games have made you laugh? A dozen, a couple dozen, just whatever comes to mind, just think of that. Off the top of my head, these are the ones that come to mind for me. It's not a, BioShock, because of the way the gameplay works, where like, I had a moment in BioShock where I tossed down a plasmid that hypnotized a guy, I think, and then he shot behind me, and I was like, oh God, what's he doing? He's not supposed to be shooting at me, but the bullet went right behind me and hit an explosive barrel, and a splicer flew on fire past my shoulder. I was like, hey, thank you, dude. Which sort of gets into what I was talking about earlier about how the gameplay is inherently kind of funny. BioShock is this very grim game, and then BioShock is one of my favorite games of all time. I'm not trying to talk shit about it, and I work with a guy who's the lead designer of it, so I'm definitely not going to talk shit about it. But the way that those systems come together in really surprising ways can often make you laugh really hard. When I think about the way that, like, the first time you see somebody using a super bomb to take down a Big Daddy, which is like, okay, I'll just I'll find a trash can, and I'll take out my proximity mine gun, and I'll just shoot 15 proximity mines onto it, and I'll pick it up, and because I've gotten the upgrade for my proximity mines that I can't take personal damage for him, I just look around for Big Daddy, and I go, here, and I just put it in front of his face, and it explodes, and he dies, and I just, like, take all the shit from his body. Like, that's kind of funny. Yeah, this is a list of just off the top of my head games that made me laugh. It's about a couple dozen. It's not a whole lot, but it's something. I mean, that's a pretty decent looking list. Yeah, exactly. That's a pretty good sign.
Where's Borderlands 2?
I don't laugh at my own game. I'm not an asshole. I take that back. I'm probably an asshole, but I don't laugh at my own game. But that said, how many games would make you cry? If we're saying that comedy is super, super hard, that implies that all the other genres are easier. How many games have made you cry? For me, it's just these 3 games. In my 25 years on this planet, only these 3 games have ever made me cry. Sorry? No, I didn't cry at Last of Us. I liked Last of Us, I just didn't cry. I'm not a fucking wuss. I just cried when the dog died because I'm a man. Spoilers. But even if we do admit that comedy in games is easier than tragedy, even if you do sort of accept that premise I just put forward, there's still so much uncharted territory in comedy. There's so much we can be doing that nobody's even really explored yet. Like, who knew that you could make a comedy game out of really weird and difficult to handle physics until QWOP and Surgeon Simulator 2013 came around? Like, that was just unthinkable. Like you were saying that a lot of the games on my list were LucasArts games. I think before games like QWOP and Surgeon Simulator and Portal came out, that was certainly where my head was at in terms of humor. Like, oh, a funny game is a game where somebody just says a joke, and you do a thing, and then they say another joke. Like, QWOP and Surgeon Simulator have 0 dialogue, and they're the funniest goddamn games ever. Just because if you've tried to watch somebody just pick up a phone in Surgeon Simulator and then they hit the thing across the desk as if like they're just some drunken person who's like, why, like some sort of like Frankenstein monster who doesn't understand how they work their limbs. That's really funny. Another good example of a gameplay-driven, with a lot of gameplay-driven humor is something like Magicka, if any of you played Magicka. Like that game, the funniness comes from like, oops, I killed you, ha ha ha, that's part of the texture of the game, rather than this thing that like punishes you, makes you feel bad. It's just like, oh my god, I like made a healing rain coming down on you, but then I accidentally like did this electricity and it fried all of us simultaneously. Like that's inherently part of the humor and part of the experience of playing that game. Before maybe the last 5 years or so, my understanding of comedy personally was just relegated to dialogue. As of recently, I'm seeing comedy come way more through gameplay, and we tried to do some of that with Borderlands 2, which I can talk about during the Q&A if you really want to hear about that. But these games, to me, are the first step in exploring interactive humor. So if Jason Rohrer's Passage was the first high-profile game that tried to explore questions of life and death and the meaning of life and all these, and aging and all these really sort of heady topics, if that was the first sort of attempt to do that purely through game mechanics, then I kind of honestly feel like these games are the passage of interactive slapstick. And I think that's really, really cool. We've had decades of comedy coming solely through adventure game puzzles or dialogue, so what's next? What's the future of interactive comedy? I honestly don't know, but I'm excited to find out. I hope you guys are going to be a part of that process of exploration and discovery. So if there's one point to my inane rambling, it is this. Please make more funny games. Make more comedies, design unusual gameplay that makes the player laugh, fill your absurdly violent shooter with jokes and gags. Please make more funny games. That is my one point to this talk. If there's a second point to this talk, it is that Katarina's OP, please rebalance. Thank you. So that's all I've got. Thank you. Somebody's clapping sounded really weird. So I'm going to give out some stuff. I figured we could do it like associated with questions, like you ask a question, I answer it, and then I give you a thing, just to try to keep things elegant. Do you want to say something?
No, we're going to hand it up for you.
Okay, cool. Oh, thanks. So who's question? Somebody back there had, yeah, you with glasses.
Could you explain a little how like the writing process works, like how you develop a story?
Sure.
Implement it into the gameplay?
Sure. So the basic, it's a back and forth where it's me working with the designers and a lot of times the artists to basically implement something they think is really cool from a design side but has no narrative context to it, or me having a really neat idea that doesn't actually have any gameplay associated with it. So like, for example, of the former, I came up with the idea for the shoot this guy in the face quest where he just goes, oh, shoot me in the face, and then you just shoot him. It's like a 2-second quest. And so I just went and talked to Ryan Heaton, who is one of our designers, a level designer and a mission designer. I was just like, can you please do this? And he went, okay, and then just did it. Which actually ended up being one of the most fucking hellishly complicated quests in the entire game, weirdly, even though it's only one thing. Example of the inverse would be like Ben Gettleman, who's another designer, came to me one day and was like, hey, I want to do a Top Gun quest. I was like, okay. He's like, would you be okay with writing just a quest that was basically just a bunch of Top Gun references? I was like, that's what I was born to do, I feel like. So I did. A lot of the times in terms of that's mainly with regards to side mission stuff. It's kind of that cross-pollination. In terms of the main plot, a lot of it came from myself and the creative director of the game, Paul Hellquist. He's the guy I was talking about earlier, who was lead designer of BioShock that I work with all the time. We sort of came up with the broad strokes of the narrative, came up with this very sort of, we're big fans of like System Shock 2, so we're like, okay, let's make a game that's like about, go find Shodan and kill her, like something like that. So we came up with Handsome Jack, and then tried to find a bunch of excuses to sort of layer in things that the level designers had already known they wanted to do. They knew they wanted Sanctuary to take off. The designers knew they wanted the original 4 Vault Hunters to come back as NPCs. They knew they wanted certain levels, like we want this ice level and this fiery level and all this shit. And so we've tried to sort of make them all sort of coexist with one another. It's basically just a constant back and forth and give and take. There's no like, this is the story, now do it, my minions. There's none of that. And it's certainly not like somebody whipping me and being like, more words, monkey, or anything like that. But, yes?
This is going to be a slightly more detailed question, but in Borderlands 2, I felt like...
You're just shitting on that guy's question. This is going to be like a stupid question like that idiot asked before.
So in Borderlands 2, I think it's a section with the Arid Nexus when you have to crash into the pipe with a car.
Yeah. Yeah, there's like, you're going to get sort of a random, we've got like pens and lanyards and shirts and mice, and then there's a big one at the end that I'm probably just going to give to you because you're wearing my shirt. But we'll see. Well, fuck it then. You just cheated yourself out of some eBay money.
I felt like the writing there, it's like the Arid Nexus became like an Arid Nexus of comedy. There wasn't much like
Yeah.
funny happening there. And
Yeah.
the whole, I mean, I know you're not a level designer, but the level itself also felt like it was just dry.
The reason it's dry is because it was literally supposed to be like the Arid Badlands from the first game. And if you played the first game, remember that your two memories are probably like, oh, that ending, and like brown. Like that game was just, there's a lot of sand and stuff. So level design, that's the way it was, reason why it was. The reason there was very little comedy in that area is because we had just basically, spoilers, but we just basically killed off Roland and kidnapped Lilith and killed off Angel and had all this really heavy shit happen. And we knew this was a possibility just because of the way the game is structured, that you could go off and find a really wacky joke on your own after that happened. But I didn't want to exacerbate that problem because you don't want like all this really heavy shit happening and then somebody makes a fart joke. Granted, people did that anyway because you would just go off and do a side quest you hadn't done before and that happened to have fart jokes in it or whatever. But I wanted the Arid Nexus to at least be a brief lull in like the like hit you in the face every 2 seconds comedy. That said, there's still some gags in it that I'm pretty proud of, like Handsome Jack pretending to be Roland and talking about going out for milkshakes and stuff like that. But yeah, that's why. You arbitrarily.
So this isn't really going to relate to comedy as much, but more the future of a different genre of games.
Okay.
I'm really interested in, because seen really good games like Amnesia come out, you've seen Slender come out, and recently Outlast. So, in your opinion, as a designer, what do you think the future of horror games is going to be?
I really, really hope that we're going to see even more games. I think Amnesia was the first sort of foray into this. I really hope we see more horror games that aren't horror / other genre games. Like Fear, I love Fear. I think it's a really fun game. It is not scary at all because there's something inherently scary about disempowerment, and there's something inherently super not scary about literally being able to go into slow motion and jump and kung fu kick a guy and then take out 2 pistols and kill everyone in the room. Like, after I do that and a little girl with like the ring hair comes up and goes, ah, like that's not fucking scary. Like, I should just go BAM! And that would be done. I think it's what you're seeing with Amnesia. Like for me, the most brilliant mechanic in Amnesia was the sanity meter and the fact that when you looked at an enemy, you got more insane and you had to look away from enemies. Because I feel like they did some sort of psychological evaluation or psychological research to find out that like not being able to see something that you know is getting closer is really fucking scary. And that sensation of hearing them get louder and louder and hearing them breathing and just going, oh my god, please just pass by me, don't fucking kill me, please don't do it. Like. That was like brilliant. And I think you're seeing a lot of more of that with like even small things like I'm playing a game called Eldritch right now. It's not out yet. I'm just bragging because I just have a build. But it's made by a guy called David Pittman who worked on Bioshock 2 at 2K Marin. And it's got these enemies that are basically, if you guys have seen Doctor Who, the Weeping Angels from Doctor Who, they basically act like that, where they're these like statues of lizards, and if you get close enough, they activate. And then if you turn around, you hear this, and then you all of a sudden half of your health is gone. And you turn around, they're like like right next to you, and it's like the scariest thing in that entire game. And that game's like got like cute Minecraft graphics, and it's not actually the thing doesn't look scary. It's the gameplay and the design itself that makes it scary. So that's my really weird and overly long way of saying I think we're going to see more games that actually try to be scary through design rather than like purely narrative or visual reasons. You.
So did you have a hand in like writing the comedy into the guns and the way that worked?
Yeah.
The gun that explodes when you throw it?
No, not that. That was Matt Armstrong and Rob Hieronymus, who were 2 designers. Matt Armstrong was creative director of the first game, and he designed all the guns, amongst other stuff, in the second game. Rob Hieronymus did all the grenades and did a bunch of gun stuff. They just thought one day, like, that would be funny. Like, what if you did that? And then they did more research into it, and then found out that it was actually really interesting gameplay-wise, because what happens if you throw a clip that's got all of its ammo? You just lost all that ammo, but if you hit, then it does a lot of damage. The guns that I kind of was a part of were like the Bane, the gun that yells at you, or the gun that... Yeah, I can understand why. Yeah, the annoying sounding one, the one that chastises you every time you kill somebody by saying like, oh, they had a family, like. That one was me. That was just a straight up, if you guys have read the comic XKCD, the webcomic XKCD, like there's a comic that's just called, it's basically saying like he made a mod to a game where every time you kill somebody it says their backstory. And the name of the number of that comic is 873, so I named that quest Hyperion Contract 873, just in, not really an homage, but like, I'm stealing this, but I know that I'm stealing it.
So when you started your talk, you talked about authored meaning versus like dynamic meaning, or authored experience and dynamic experience, how they tend to conflict in games. And so your approach to try and solve that seemed like it was essentially kind of subverting player expectations. And I'm curious, I guess, because to a certain extent that almost feels like a one-off. It feels like while you subvert these expectations, you introduce comedy, but you remove contextual depth. Like you have no justification for your actions because it's funny.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, how would you try and preserve depth and meaning, quote unquote, in a game while still introducing comedy?
I think it comes down to how the comedy works. Like I think Because of Reasons is exactly what you're saying, where I'm basically sacrificing depth and narrative complexity for a joke. I'm using it as a band-aid for actual substance. I think other times there's a lot of comedy in the game that does not necessarily remove depth. It can be additive or at least parallel to depth. Like, for example, the thing I was talking about earlier where like we used gameplay, sort of a mechanic that you've gotten used to for this joke about Handsome Jack, where it's generally given that, it's a given that when the echo, we call him Echo, but the echo portrait of a character shows up on your upper right-hand corner of the screen, you see their picture, and then that person talks to you. The player has sort of gotten used to that basic pattern, like it's a very simple pattern. And then near the end of the game, we have Roland's echo portrait come up after he's dead, and then Handsome Jack's voice comes out, and he makes fun of you pretending to be Roland. Like, that to me actually adds a little bit of depth because it's Jack twisting the knife and talking, and he's basically going on to talk about how much he wants to kill you and how much of a dick you are, and how he so easily killed this big bad Vault Hunter Roland, and you're going to be next. Like, I think there's a way to sort of meld jokes and that stuff in a way that doesn't undercut it. I think some of the examples I used were more of the like, aha, fuck you, like kind of example. But I would like to believe that a lot of the comedy in Borderlands 2 doesn't take away from the not necessarily the severity of the experience, because it's not this like, again, it's not sad violins and children dying and shit, but it hopefully gives you, still provides you the context you need to know, like, why do I need to kill Handsome Jack? Oh, because he did all this really fucked up shit. Why do I need to care about this person? Oh, because they're still a person, they're not just a caricature of a person, like, hopefully. I don't know. Way in the back. Yes?
I'm just curious, what was the idea behind Butt Stallion?
Butt Stallion is one of my favorite gags in the game because it almost didn't happen. Like, the original idea was the new use stations are owned by Hyperion, and Jack is the president of Hyperion, and he wants to kill you. So we had this really weird plot thing where, like, Handsome Jack wants to kill you. Okay, succeeded. Like why didn't he doesn't say anything? So we had originally all this dialogue where Handsome Jack had a chance to talk to you when you died, and he would laugh about like the idea I had was that there was like going to be 4 or 5 different echo lines that would play every time you died, and he'd be like, hey, I'm getting a lot of money from all this dying you're doing. Hey, it's great. And eventually he would build up to the fact that like, you died so many times I bought a pony made of diamonds, and then the Butt Stallion joke. All that got cut because we felt like drawing too much attention to you in that way was kind of weird. So we just I had that idea for that line, and I really liked it, but I didn't have anywhere to put it. But the intro of the game got rejiggered really significantly. It used to be that you were fighting in a coliseum for Handsome Jack, and like he betrays you and like takes away all your stuff, and like he directly like shoots you in the face and kicks you out into the tundra. Like it was a really direct kind of a thing. That got changed into what it is in the main game, which is like you're on a train and the train explodes, and like he made the train explode. And so we realized, oh fuck, like the whole point of our game is go kill this guy, and you don't know why this guy matters until like 4 hours later when you get to Sanctuary, because we cut out that one part where he makes himself known as the villain. So I was just rushing to try and find things that I liked that I could have him say something at the beginning of the game that made him like a person, like made you aware that he existed in the story, and hopefully made you laugh and made him interesting. And that was just my favorite joke that I had written for him that was unused at the time. So I was like, fuck it, Butt Stallion. And then thankfully people caught onto it and really liked it. So. What?
The DLC Tiny Tina's Assault. You got to see Butt Stallion.
Yeah, you spoil it, you motherfucker. Yeah. Yeah, spoily guy.
How exactly did you get into starting and getting into writing? Like, did you?
I just did it. I went to the Destructoid.com forums and I wrote a review of Shadow of the Colossus and tried to be as like eloquent and funny as I could. And they really needed writers back then, so they're like, oh, okay, you want to write for the front page? And I went, woo, awesome. And I would have been super happy to write for Destructoid for the rest of my life. I liked writing about games and shit like that. And then I started doing my web series, Hey Ash, What You Playing? Because all my friends left for college and I was just alone in Arizona, which was the worst place to be in, period, much less alone without friends. And I thought, well, you know, maybe I'll just do some stuff with my sister. Whoa, that sounded weird. I will. Maybe I'll just film a web series about comedy and video games with my sister. I almost said I'll just film my sister. That's weirder. And I just did it, which to me is the most important part of being a creative person, is like just doing it. Because every mean commenter, everybody in the world can just say, oh, that sucks, I could do better. The really hard thing, the really, really difficult thing is to just start doing it. There's this huge hump from being able to criticize something to doing it. Once you do it, then doors start opening up and people start, like, the reason I got hired at Gearbox is because of Hey Ash, What You Playing? They could look at that and see, like, this guy has a sense of humor, this guy really likes video games, this guy has opinions that kind of sync up with our opinions. Yeah. You in the back and against the wall. Yeah.
So I gotta say, I really, really love Tiny Tina.
Oh, thank you.
You're two of my favorite characters. I would really love to know the process behind them. Did you know you were going to make a character like Mr. Torg or Tiny Tina, or was that just something, hey, let's do this?
The process for Torg was pretty simple because initially Torg was just a voice on a radio. We just needed voices for each of the gun manufacturers. And each of the gun manufacturers has a different promise. And the promise of Torg is just things explode a lot. So I thought, like, that's a very like Randy Savage snap into a Slim Jim type of thing. So like I'll do my own version of that. And then I ended up liking the voice actor we got from Chris Rager so much that when it came time to do a DLC, I was like, oh, I'll just make him part of the DLC and make him show up. So like that was just lucky. The Tiny Tina thing was, I kind of just wanted to make some new characters that were like, that I could feel like, oh, these are my characters. Like, because coming into a sequel, like I didn't make up Tannis or Scooter or Crazy or any of those guys. I wanted something that was kind of that I could play around with and make something new. And maybe just because I'm really uncreative, but like I liked writing dialogue for Ash in our web series, Hey Ash, What You Playing? And I kind of wrote Tiny Tina with her in mind, just with her sort of speech patterns and the sort of things that Ash and I find funny, like just quoting Drake lyrics and stuff like that. And I just kind of put it in and just saw how it did. Guess I got lucky. Orange shirt, but behind you. You're doing this right now. You.
I'm orange, that's Brett.
I'm colorblind. Sorry, I'm colorblind. I apologize.
Thank you. So, yeah.
Question canceled. Orange guy, you're up. No, I'm joking. No, I'm red guy.
What are your thoughts on games that don't really have like gameplay mechanics? Like when I think of a game that doesn't have gameplay mechanics, I think of games like Flower or Dear Esther. What do you think of those?
I love Dear Esther. I really like Gone Home is another good example of something that you might put in that. Have you played Gone Home?
I haven't, but I am.
Everyone in this room should play Gone Home. If you're interested in video games, if you're interested in video game narrative, or really narrative in general, you have to play Gone Home. I like them. Sorry? Gone Home. It's by the Fulbright company. It's on Steam right now. It's really, really good. I like them. I think it's really cool to basically find other ways of exploring expression of ideas or tone or mood or anything like that through video games. I think something like Dear Esther or Proteus or Gone Home are really a good part of what Steve Gaynor, the lead designer of Gone Home, calls the immersion model of meaning. So like in high school, they tell you about the message model of meaning. You read the short story, and there is a message in the short story, and at the end, you find out what the message is. The immersion model of meaning, as Steve Gaynor sort of posits it, is that just existing in a game space, in a virtual world, and manipulating that world, even if you're not manipulating in really significant ways like shooting things and setting things on fire, even if you're just moving around and touching things and investigating things, can give you a sense of what that world is like and what the values of that world are and how you sort of fit into that world. Gone Home is specifically about finding out like who the inhabitants of this home are and what your place is in that home and how these people played off one another and all that kind of stuff. So I'm psyched about those. There's some of them that I don't like very much, but there are others that I do, but that's just the way life works. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I just got Machine for Pigs, but I can't find the like third thing I have to turn. So I'm just like, I guess I'm not playing this game, okay. I'm not good at finding hitting objects. Sorry, Chinese room. Just you're doing a sad face.
Do you think games have become too long, just in general?
Yeah.
I know a lot of people I can't finish most games I play, so it's nice playing Blood Dragon, which was a couple hours of fun and it was cheap. So I'm just thinking, most games nowadays, I don't have the attention span to finish them since they don't really evolve too
Yeah.
much mechanically or gameplay or narrative-wise.
Yeah, I mean, this is purely a personal opinion, but I agree. I think most games are probably too long. I think I've played a lot of games where it feels like you had enough mechanics to maybe satisfy me for 4 hours, and then you just kept copying and pasting those until I got 20 hours. There's a sort of mentality that I don't agree with, that game's length is directly related to its quality. That, oh, it sucked 50 hours of my life. I'm 50 hours closer to death upon completing this game. That means it's better than a really short, focused, really good experience that gave me something meaningful. Like, by that basic logic, if you watched Paul Blart Mall Cop 8 times in a row, that's twice as good as The Godfather. Like, I don't particularly agree with that. White shirt, or I don't know what color that is. I'm colorblind.
Who's your favorite character in Borderlands 2?
Handsome Jack, I guess, because he, for me, was he was the linchpin that kind of held the plot together. If you didn't dislike him, but also kind of find him funny, then the entire plot didn't work. I guess. I mean, they were really good because the actor, Damien Clark. Because Damien Clark brought so much to them, so a lot of the lines that people really like of his had little bits of ad-lib that he just sort of tossed in and made them way better, so yeah.
I wanted to ask, what are your thoughts on Twine? And
I love Twine.
Sub-question is,
Fucking sub-question.
If you could like program a robot, tell the difference between like a Twine game or interactive fiction and a game, what do you think makes that distinction between a game and like just...
There are distinctions that can be made between interactive fiction and game, but kind of don't think they're the most helpful in terms of like being someone who's wanting to understand how games can make you feel, or being someone who wants to make interesting games. Like, they're kind of just arbitrary delineations. It's the like, oh, are games art? Like, the kind of thing that actually matters is not are games art, but like how do they express emotion, how they accomplish all these things. I've played some Twine games, like I believe it's called Sacrilege by Kara Ellison, that gave me this completely different perspective on the world, basically through just text and sort of choices that aren't choices. And there's something about the way that a lot of Twine games are not very open and free that is interesting in terms of showing you like, hey, you think this is a choice, but in actuality, if you were in this situation as I was, it didn't feel like there was a choice or whatever. Like, I love Twine. I made a game in Twine for my wife that was just supposed to be like a simulation of like hanging out with me, because I was going to be gone for 2 weeks. So I was like, it's the Anthony simulation Twine game, and every day you're supposed to try to get a different ending, and some of them, like, I turn into a crab monster and she has to fight me, and like you do. Yeah.
Trying to get a way to motivate my students into thinking that they're worth making versus like.
Have you had them play like Porpentine stuff and Porpentine? There's a huge movement amongst the Twine community for transgender game designers that are basically finding that Twine, because it has such a low barrier to entry, is one of the first places where they can really start.
Kids like aren't taught to learn it.
Yeah, no, you should show them Porpentine and
How do you spell that?
Porpentine. She made a game called Howling Dogs. Howling Dogs. Thanks.
You had this play with depression game.
Yeah, the Depression Quest. Yeah. And Seven Guy. Yeah.
You're actively working in the industry now for a
Yeah.
while now. I'm curious, how does your day go by revolving that, and how was it before you really got yourself into the industry?
You mean like what is my average day today versus?
What it was before, just to get an idea, because I'm about
Sure.
to turn 30. I'm just getting myself back in track on life. I'm realizing I don't have the time I used to fuck around.
Mhm.
Just as perspective, I'm wondering, how was it for you now?
Sure. So I went straight from college to video games. So like, I guess an average college day for me would be like, wake up, rub one out, think about my life, how I made mistakes, rethink all my past relationships, go to class for 6 hours, come home, rub one out, play a lot of video games, and then if Ash was around, like film a Hey Ash episode or whatever, and then go to bed. It was a very I didn't have a lot of free time. That's not true. I had a fair amount of free time to play video games and fuck around and stuff like that, but within that, the good thing about doing Hey Ash, my series, is that the episodes are really short, so you can do them in a short span of time. Like, we do an entire year's worth of filming in 2 weeks. Like, it's just really easy. But I used what free time I had to make something. Today, it's wake up, rub one out, go to work until 6, come home, eat and play video games with my wife until we fall asleep, which is 2. We just sort of hang out a lot, and I waste my time. I don't do cool creative things as much anymore because I'm doing that at work, and it just gets kind of draining if you were to go home and more things. But I guess that's not actually true. I do short stories and shit. I don't know what I'm talking about, man. The only question I couldn't answer adequately was the one about my own life.
What was the criteria for your designing DLC?
It had to be at least 5 hours worth of stuff, and it had to ship at a particular time. That was about it. Beyond that, it was whatever we wanted to think of that was cool, that had a really strong narrative hook. So Pirates, or WrestleMania, or big game hunting, or Dungeons & Dragons. That's pretty much how we do it. Yeah, you. No, the Anne Hathaway. You look like Anne Hathaway. That's a compliment. Yeah, you. Yeah. Sorry, I only pointed that out just because the guy behind you totally doesn't look like Anne Hathaway, and I thought that would. I mean, no offense. You're a very good-looking man. You're just not Anne Hathaway good-looking.
What's your favorite and least favorite thing about writing for video games?
My favorite thing is how collaborative it is, that I'm not working in this crazy, scary vacuum, that I'm bouncing off one another and getting a lot of feedback and stuff. And seeing the way that, I guess my favorite and least favorite thing are almost the same thing, which is that people that play games latch on to writing a lot more than they latch on to other, in my opinion, more important aspects of what makes a game. You very seldom, I've done talks like this, and I get interviewed and stuff like that. I get put in front of cameras all the time for promoting Borderlands and stuff. And it makes me feel like a fraud because I just wrote the fart jokes. The reason people like Borderlands is because of this incredible gun system, or the enemy design, or the levels, or the art, or all that stuff. But for some reason, we understand, I think, as people's stories a lot more inherently than we understand something like game design and the nuances of game design. So people will talk about, oh, I really love these jokes, and that's what makes Borderlands good. It's like, no, what actually makes Borderlands good is the fact that when you're about to die, you go into a down state, and if you kill a person, you get back up, which is like this positive feedback loop that encourages you to be reckless but also cautious, and all these things that, like, we don't actually have a very good vocabulary if you're talking about game design. So a lot of the times people will just go to something they understand, like diamond pony jokes, rather than sort of discussing the nuances of design. So I guess that would be my least favorite part. If I've asked you a question, if I've answered one of your questions, please put your hand down because I just don't remember and I don't want to fuck over other people.
I don't like the games where you were talking about like corporate or comedy games. Like, what are your ideas with doing that? Like, you have any ideas like mechanic-wise, just like the games you try, make it have more immersive and impactful gameplay and not just narrative?
Yeah, there's a talk I did at GDC that was all about trying to convey humor through game mechanics. The long and short of it was like using mechanics to subvert expectation, or using the game mechanics themselves to tell jokes, like the gun in Borderlands 2 that like makes the annoying noise when you shoot it. Like, that gun itself is a punchline to a joke, and inherently it's kind of a joke and it's kind of funny. And that entire quest didn't have a line of like funny dialogue in it. So for me, the key is trying to find ways that make you laugh, that doesn't involve like a character showing up, saying a joke, and then like leaving. Like something that, again, Surgeon Simulator. It's just using a hand to maneuver things, but it's fun.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, so writing, did you do this as a hobby when you were a kid? If so, like how long have you been doing this for? Like,
The first time I ever started really writing was probably in grade school, because I had a friend who was a super cool, like, he was a really nice guy. He was like a super handsome jock dude who was like a badass at everything. And like, I was like the cool guy for a long time, and then he was this new kid who came in, and he was way cooler than me at everything. And I was basically worse than him at everything, except we did this creative writing exercise once, and my story was like way better than his and got all these laughs, and I was like, ah ha 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 ha. This is how I will destroy him. And from that point on, I was kind of interested in it. The really big, the formative moment for me, and I guess if anybody is ever going to be an educator here, I would very highly suggest that you do something like this, is in high school, my first big book project, they said, instead of writing a report, you can make a video. That's all they said. You can just do that. You can express yourself in these different ways that just show me that you read the fucking book. And so I teamed up with a bunch of my friends, and we made all these videos about like the War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells and all this stuff. And those were my friends, and I learned that A, I really liked those guys. B, I really liked making films and writing sort of stories, because they were basically just little stories that I had sort of written and made films. And C, there was no C. But like we basically became friends and kept making films. And if I hadn't initially had that ability to make a book report in the form of a film, I literally wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have started doing Hey Ash, which means I wouldn't have gotten the job at Gearbox, which means blah, 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 blah. Yeah, orange. For real orange.
First, can I get a mouse?
Ooh, faced. Yeah, fuck, son.
In a lot of other mediums, like in television, a lot of the comedy genres, they're more, I don't want to say highbrow, but they don't always rely on like slapsticks, like something like Arrested Development
Right.
or Community. They're more on, the comedy is more based on like how the characters interact with each other and basically just this turn of events that happen. And so with games, like you sort of mentioned, a lot of the games mainly rely on like violence and sort of the slapstick sort of kind of comedy. So how would you see, like how would you think that games would start to evolve more beyond just the slapstick sort of writing comedy, more like, you know, character interactions and all the other forms of comedy?
For me, it depends on the kind of genre of the game. Like, the reason I brought up the violence is because I write for shooters. Like, the games I write for are just naturally violent, and so my comedy has to work within that context. The reason that you can have subtle, interesting character interaction in Arrested Development is because the majority of the time you're watching Arrested Development, you're watching characters sit in a room and talk to one another and say jokes. The majority of the time you're playing Borderlands, you're watching people's heads explode and things are going off and you're shooting guns and all that stuff, and I'm basically trying to compete for your attention by having a character sit in the upper right-hand corner of your screen saying like, hey, there's a plot. I think if you have game design that is more, I guess, I don't want to say subdued, but like less intense and less over the top and less crazy all the time, then you could maybe have moments for that subtlety. So like Portal, by way of example, has a lot of really great, really sort of dry, classy, almost Arrested Development-esque humor to it. And I think one of the reasons they get away with that is because Portal is a more slow-paced, more subdued, more thoughtful game, where you're just sort of solving puzzles and navigating this environment where people aren't just screaming at you all the time and throwing buzz-asks at your face. Like, you get away with this more subtle kind of comedy. I think, maybe this is just because I'm not as good a writer as Eric Woolpall, and not by like a fucking country mile, but if I had tried to do something like that for Borderlands, it might have been harder to just sort of cut through the noise that is the gameplay of Borderlands. But again, I just don't think I'm as good of a writer as Eric Woolpall is. I bet if he did a Borderlands, it would be fucking amazing. So.
Here's my question. If you have writer's block, how do you kind of get over that? Because I try to write.
Rub one out. Honestly, I'd take a. Honestly, I do other things. I play video games. I surf the internet. Taking a shower is actually a really good thing for me for some reason. The two places I get the most of my ideas are in the shower or right before I'm going to go to bed, infuriatingly. Where I'm like, I have a good idea. Fuck, goddamn, I got to get up and go right. It could be that, yeah, and you're just really relaxed and you're just focused. Like you're sort of. There's a thing that Salvador Dali used to do where he would, what?
I think there was a thing that most people get their best ideas in the bathroom.
There's that. I don't get it when I'm in the, like, doing the poopy stuff. But there's a thing that Salvador Dali used to do where when he needed an idea, he would sit on a chair and put a key in his hand, just held between his middle finger and his thumb, and he'd put a bowl, just a metal bowl underneath his hand, and he'd lie back and try to go to sleep, and by the time he went to sleep enough, he got sleepy enough that he would let go of the key, and it would hit the bowl and wake him up, and then he'd go, okay, I got an idea. Because just being in dream state for just that brief period of time would give him something fucked up enough that he's like, all right, melting clocks, motherfuckers. But yeah, you had a question too?
Mine's about the types of comedy games, and referential comedy was really big in games. There were a lot of comedy games in the 80s, and I noticed, like you said, it died off. I mean, we had the Leather Goddess of Phobos, the Hitchhiker's Guide, the Space Quest.
Yeah, Leisure Suit Larry. And
yeah, it was full of referential humor. And when I saw, your Randy Savage character, as soon as I saw him, I saw Snap into a Slim Jim.
Right.
Yeah. But is it something you try to avoid a lot? I mean, this medium has a lot shorter lifespan, so you're not going to have the jokes like become nonsensical 20 years down the line because you don't know people are replaying this game for long.
Yeah. I don't think a lot of the jokes in Borderlands 2 are going to age like a fine wine, to be honest. The referential stuff comes a lot from the fact that was just part of the DNA of Borderlands 1. Like you met a character in Borderlands 1 who drove around in a car shooting things, and his name was Mad Mel, like Mad Max. So it's just like, okay, that's just the thing Borderlands can do and get away with. Ha ha ha. That's a shitload easier than coming up with your own jokes. So boom, here's a fucking Air to the Knee joke, and here's that everyone hates, and here's internet memes that everyone hates, and here's some Breaking Bad stuff that everyone really likes for some reason. Like,
So is there a limit on the referential? I mean,
yeah, no, I'm trying to do less and less and less of it. A lot of it comes from designers just wanting to do fun stuff like that. So we had this, like I was saying, the Top Gun quest that the guy just wanted to do, or the Dragon Keep DLC we just did had a whole quest that was just about, I want to do a Game of Thrones reference quest, a lot of the designers said. So we just did that, but I tried to make it something beyond just referencing by having the basic plot of it be that Tina makes this Game of Thrones reference quest for her friends, but one of them hasn't read Game of Thrones, so he doesn't get all the references. And he's like, can you make something that like I understand? So she goes, okay, what show do you like? He goes, Downton Abbey. So she like makes a character from Downton Abbey. And like, so my hope is to like, if you're going to reference something, take it and then make it your own and make more jokes off it that aren't just like, hey, you remember that thing that I like that too, yay! Like, that's kind of lazy. And I've done a lot of that, but I'm trying to do less of it. Way in the iPad or laptop, holding laptop.
So you said that you had to start with shoot the blimps when in the DLC we're talking about?
Yeah.
When you make comedy. So would you say that it's easier and or more efficient to start with mechanics or story? And which is more important? For example, film is said to be 60% sound. What percent of gameplay, or what percent is humor and or drama?
Yeah, I know where you come from. In my opinion, gameplay comes first. The reason that Borderlands 2 is not filled with a bunch of cutscenes is because myself and the creative director and the art director all believe that gameplay comes first. Borderlands is not a game about sitting around listening to cutscenes and watching scripted events and having to go through doors only after a guy breaches it for you and all that kind of shit. Call of Duty. And because of that, we melded the story around that. We said, okay, what are the mechanics going to be? What are the basic things we want you to do? The things we wanted you to do in terms of what levels you're going to do were sometimes coming from level designers, like I said earlier, or sometimes it was like, you know what, dramatically, this needs blank. Like, this needs you to fight alongside Brick, or this needs you to have this character die in a boss fight, or whatever. So it was going back and forth. There was never one or the other, but at the end of the day, gameplay always came first. Glasses. Yes, you. Yeah.
As technology has advanced, for example, video recorders becoming really common, people have become able to produce videos and movies, whereas like 20 years ago, basically nobody had video cameras.
Right.
Everybody still watched movies. As tech and like the technological education goes on, what do you think is going to happen with the small guy getting to express himself in video game making?
It can only get better. It's like what I was saying earlier with Twine. A lot of game designers who didn't have voices now have voices. They can talk about what it's like to be transgender or gay or, you know, black or any of these things that you just generally don't see in AAA games or even a lot of indie games where it's mainly about like still, even a lot of indie games are about being a cool white dude bro doing cool white dude bro things. And it can only be a good thing when more people have access to tools to make cool stuff. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the ease of access to good cameras for filmmaking because of Hey Ash, What You Playing. Or then again, if you don't like Hey Ash, What You Playing, that's a really good example of why it's not good to democratize that stuff, but that's my opinion. Yeah, we're next to Anne Hathaway.
So, one of the things I really like about dialogue games is how it can also be expressed through like pointless banter, like Dragon Age or the Keith stories from Left 4 Dead 2.
Right.
And I would always tell my friends, man, I really like these little small banter places that come out of nowhere, like completely randomly. But a friend of mine told me that he really hated that because he felt like it would break the mood of the places that you were in or stuff like that. Has any developer ever stonewalled you for putting, comedic dialogue here and there because they feared that it was going to remove the sort of atmosphere they wanted to establish?
No. It would always be discussion. There was never a hard like, no, you can't do this. There was never me saying, no, I must do this. We would always talk it out, and I try to be receptive to that kind of thing because it's the Luna narrative dissonance thing. You don't want your game design to be saying something and your dialogue to be saying something else that just strikes you as hollow. I love Uncharted 2. I love Uncharted 2. But there are moments when Drake will jump on a guy and snap his neck, and there'll be this savage neck snapping noise, and I'll go, oh, and he'll go, ha ha, and I'll suddenly feel like I'm controlling this sociopath, and it really takes. And I try to avoid that as much as I can. That's why I really push to have the player characters in Borderlands talk kind of not that much, or they never comment on the plot in Borderlands 2. They just do battle stuff. And I tried to relegate that to just the sort of things that you would say in a battle situation, like, oh, hey, cool headshot, like when you get a headshot or whatever. But we found out from the people who played the game that no, they want way more character from those guys. They want to know what their backstories are, and they want them to react to the plot. And that was one of the biggest things that people really wanted from the story. So I was like, fuck. Philosophically, that's not my cup of tea, but if they like it, they like it. NES controller? Yeah.
How do you juggle maintaining the pace of the story and then throwing in jokes? How do you draw the line where it's not going to be distracting and yet it's not going to become boring without it?
The kind of goal is to combine story and jokes and information. The most important thing in story, above all else in a video game, is does it tell the player what they need to know to progress in the game? Mordecai can make a joke about drinking all he wants, but at the end of that fucking line, he still has to say, by the way, you need to do this to get into the wildlife exploitation preserve. Handsome Jack can make fun of you, but he needs to be making fun of you about something that's relevant to the plot so you understand what's going on. So comedy in a lot of ways is a way of trying to take these basically just hellishly expository things or instructional things and just spice them up a little bit so that the player doesn't feel like they're just being told, get the red key. Awesome, now go to the red door. Oh, you're so good. Okay, now get a blue key. All right, now blue, oh my God, you got to the blue door. You're the best. Oh my God. Just finding a way to try to spice that up. I might have a character do that at some point, I don't know. Climbing shirt?
Going off of his comment before on the advances in technology, what do you see with advances such as the Oculus Rift and the future of game design?
I don't know. I think the Oculus Rift could be something that's really, really cool and really, really immersive, or it could be something that just makes everybody nauseous, so for a while it goes away and then comes back later. We tried, movies tried 3D for a really long time, and it didn't work, and it didn't work, and it didn't work, and it didn't work, and then all of a sudden, just as of recently, it kind of does work. So I don't know. I think certainly it gives you more interesting things to do. You found already just people doing crazy experimental things with it, like the execution simulator, like the really creepy one where you just like, you watch a thing come down and chop off your head, and then your head rolls, and you're just like, oh, you get this weird out-of-body thing, or the being around in space, that loneliness kind of simulator. So yeah, there's just really cool immersive things I think you can do with that. In terms of comedy, I don't know. Maybe you'll like do that thing where like you have to do sit-ups and then somebody puts their butt in front of your face or something.
About 40 minutes. You want to take a few more questions, do the loot chest, wrap it up?
Sorry, how much?
You've been doing this for about 40 minutes. Take a few more questions, loot chest. You want to wrap it up?
Okay.
All right, cool.
Sure.
Just whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys still have questions, I mean,
Yeah, go for it.
it's what.
What you want.
Okay, cool.
So you mentioned earlier that repetition is a really useful tool in comedy. I know we'll laugh anytime Bonaparte comes up, but there's a lot of really tongue-in-cheek third-person shooters that fail because they're way too repetitive. And anytime I hear the necromancer say "anarchy, baby," it's deadpan. So how do you balance the running gag versus the just deadpan repetition?
By trying to write a lot of dialogue. Like, actually, there's sort of two ways to solve that. One is write a shitload of dialogue. Like, Gage probably should have had just more dialogue for that kind of a situation. And B, I said one and B. Fuck, I hate it when people do that. Two is making dialogue that doesn't stand out so much that you notice it being repeated. So like, if somebody's just saying reloading, like it's really short, it's really staccato, it just gets to the point. You can have Bill and Zoe in Left 4 Dead say reloading 100,000 times and you never really notice it. It's not a big deal. But that's kind of the downside of trying to tell a joke, is that if the joke draws enough attention to itself and tries to be like a special thing that you notice, then you will notice it every time and get really sick of it. So like anybody who's played one of the early like Spider-Man games can know that, because like they give Spider-Man like 5 quips and the entire game is just those 5 quips over and over, and it's like, oh my god, please, could you just written some more like, there's this worry of like, oh, I don't want to write like boring dialogue. He'll just say like, hi, I punched you, and that won't be cool. But actually it's a lot more repeatable over the course of 20 hours than like, making a really specific pun is. Like, yeah, you. I'll get you next. Yes, you.
Do you think there's any particular style of game or gameplay that lends itself well to comedic writing or comedic story?
I think you can put comedy in a lot of different types of games. I think games that are really scary and stressful, probably not so much. Like, if you played Papers, Please, the basic gameplay of Papers, Please is so stressful and so just existentially just draining. I don't know if you could put like fart jokes in there and have them work really well. But I mean, Portal showed that you can do it in a puzzle game. Hopefully Borderlands shows that you can do it in a really violent shooter context. A game like Gunpoint shows that you can do it with a stealth puzzle hacky game. So I think you can probably do it with more types of games than you'd think.
Because player interaction, that's almost guaranteed comedy, because the players will create themselves.
Yeah, the player is an agent of chaos in a world that is full of very discrete systems, and then inherently will lend itself to funniness. Like, even if you only have 2 things you can do in a room. Like, Gone Home, going back to Gone Home. The only thing you can do in Gone Home is pick things up and rotate them and put them down. You can still do really funny, weird shit like stacking a bunch of things on top of a person's like bed, where it's like, oh, this is a letter about my girlfriend leaving me. It's like, no, well, now it's a fucking shrine to all these cups I found. Like, you can just do that and be funny, and that's just something that the player can do. You're completely right. So, yeah, you.
What would you say would be the do's and don'ts of comedy in video games, or would you say that it would vary depending on the intent of the design of the game?
The second thing you said. I don't feel like I'm confident enough or talented enough or enough of an asshole to tell people what they should or should not do. I can only say what sort of worked for me and what I find interesting. But yeah.
So we know that the new consoles are coming out.
Yeah.
And have you got your hand on any of them? PS4, Xbox
Mhm.
One, and like preference, like any?
Yeah, PC.
Good about it? PC. PC has some. Would you like to play a game of League with me?
I'm fucking awful at League.
Come on.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't want to get beat in the League. I had enough of that shit. People tell me to uninstall. That's a bummer.
So we're all laughing by your comments on like first-person shooters like Call of Duty and stuff like that. So you honestly have like a really good sense of humor about that kind of stuff. And Gearbox has an IP called Duke Nukem that they applies to.
I haven't heard of that.
Considered like doing any writing for that genre? I mean that franchise? Or?
I did a very, very, very small amount of writing for that when I first got to Gearbox. I gave them here's a list of suggestions for jokes and stuff like that, because this is a little, like, I'm not shitting on the guys who made it or anything like that, but there's this one thing, there's just this niggle I have which is Duke uses the phrase, actually several characters use the phrase decimate when they mean destroy. Decimate means destroy 1/10 of. So I thought it would be a really funny running joke if Duke was a grammar Nazi. And so like somebody says that and he goes, decimate actually means reduce to 1/10, just by the way. And would like not make a big deal out of it, and they'd be like, okay. And,
So like your boss has like 2 unannounced projects. Are you related? Can we expect something from you?
yeah, yeah. Attack of the Show shirt.
Is there any one particular thing that video games have historically seen though?
Yeah, I'm kind of tired of games that force you to do a particular thing and then say, oh, you're a fucking asshole for doing that thing. Like, there's been a couple of games that came out that recently did that are like, this is a game where we force you to shoot people in the face in order to progress. You're an asshole for shooting people in the face in order to progress. Like, to me, the really interesting way of making the player feel like an asshole is by giving them a choice and making them sort of judge themselves based on that choice. So like XCOM is a really good example of that to me, where you can, your characters permanently die in XCOM if they die. There are terror missions where you have to save civilians from aliens, but they're the most dangerous aliens in the game. So you have to make these decisions about, okay, is it worth letting innocent people die to keep my soldiers safe so they can save more lives in the future? And depending on those choices, you can end up feeling like an asshole. That, to me, is a much more interesting asshole exploration than making a linear scripted game where I have to be an asshole and then going, oh. Sorry?
What's an example of a game where
There are people who have said examples. I don't want to say because then it's, if anybody sees this video, it'll be like, fucking Borderlands 2 writer hates this game. So I wanted to give away really quickly. I'm going to keep going back. If we're cool with the area, I'm cool with continuing to answer questions just because I have a big fucking ego. Okay. But yeah, I wanted to give away this first, which is it's a diamond loot chest Borderlands 2 thing. It's sealed, so I mean, it could be a box full of heads. I don't know. I haven't opened it. What's in the box? I have also seen that movie. Oh, cool, yeah. So I thought we could maybe do a trivia question or something like that to see who gets it. All right, everybody. All right. So fuck it. I'll just go. I don't have a good enough understanding of the game I wrote to really think of something accurate. But so Hey Ash, What You Playing is a show I do. What is the second ever episode of Hey Ash, What You Playing?
Was it the canceled Dark Knight game?
No. No, you're so close though. No. No. All right, fuck, that was a stupid question. What was the first ever episode of Hey Ash, What You Playing? That was the answer to the previous question. All right, maybe it's fucking shitty and egocentric to do a Hey Ash thing. Let's talk Borderlands then. Okay, so fuck. Okay, so all right, here's a weird obscure one. So of the 4 Vault Hunters, the playable Vault Hunters, one of them is a native to Pandora.
Salvador.
Correct. All right, you got it. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
No problem. It's just a game. Just a game. A game that he's already played, so I don't even know why I asked a Borderlands question to do that. But yeah, if you want to take it out and do whatever you want with it. So I'm still okay with answering questions if you guys want to ask questions. So. God damn it, Trickster. Yeah.
I know you talked about how, like, you have to do it for Borderlands 2.
I didn't have to do it. I'm lazy and I did it.
So, like, how easy is it to fall in? Is it bad to, like, accept those tropes? Like, damn.
Yeah. Yeah, good question, Trickster. So yeah, if anybody didn't hear, he was asking, so Borderlands 2 was highlighted in Anita Sarkeesian's video series, Tropes versus Women in Gaming, which I really like, and I'm really bummed that I fucked up and that I'm in the series. Like I'm not like, oh, this series is bullshit. Like it's completely legit, the reason she points out for it being problematic. And his question was, is it easy to fall into tropes, that kind of a thing? How easy is it to fall into tropes?
Is it bad to accept them?
Yeah, I think it's really bad to accept tropes because the problem is that you don't fall into a trope because you're hateful or because you don't like women or because you want to oppress a particular social group or racial group or whatever. You fall into them because the same reason you fall into any cliche, which is that they're easy. Like the whole reason that Lilith gets captured is because we wanted to make Lilith powerful and cool because she's a girl and you don't often see that. So like, let's make her so powerful she can raise a city into the sky and then make it disappear, and that's fucking awesome. But then in the third act, if she can just do that, why doesn't she just go, hey, Handsome Jack, blam, and just end it? So we had to find a way to get her off stage, which unfortunately meant like, fuck, we've set up all this stuff with the sirens and Iridium. It seems like the cleanest thing to do narratively would be to just fucking make Jack kidnap her and have her be this like tool to open a key. And it's like super shitty and really, really kind of demeaning and demoralizing to that character. And I was aware of it at the time, yeah. I was like, there was a moment real early on in development where I was like, I try to think of myself as a progressive person, but this game ends with the black guy dying and the girl getting kidnapped. God fucking, I was so angry. And I'm still angry about it. I knew even then that was the cleanest and easiest way to end the story that would cause the least amount of trouble for everybody else. It would make the story the most clear and the most easy to understand. But even then, I fucking hated that I did it. And that's the way that tropes can work, is that like, oh, I just happened to find myself in this position where I did the same thing that everybody else does that I hate so much. And that's why I think it's really important, and why Anita Sarkeesian's videos are really important, is to be aware of those tropes so you can really, because you really have to actively try to avoid tropes. They're not a thing that you just choose to do. There's something you fall into out of lack of, creativity or whatever.
Do you think the advancement of all the Let's Plays like Game Grumps that are on YouTube right now are helping advance comedy in the industry?
Yeah, totally. I mean, they're just funny as shit. Like, and they're bringing the idea of gameplay being funny to a wider audience. When you like watch somebody die in a fucked up way in Spelunky during a daily, and then you hear them laughing and you start laughing. I think it's in a small way making it more accepted that like, hey, it's actually like inherently funny that some of these things happen, and that's an accepted form of comedy and all that kind of stuff.
Well, it also makes some games that weren't even supposed to be funny in their own
That's
way.
totally true, yeah.
As a Game Grumps, I never would have thought of Sonic 06 being the funniest game I've ever
Yeah,
played.
the thing with the box. Yeah. Yeah.
Were you all at all involved in Poker Night 2 and the flirting between Claptrap and GLaDOS?
Almost not at all. That was primarily a dude named Mike Stemmel, who works at Telltale. He did all the writing for Claptrap. So, like, I added some suggestions for things he could say. Like, I had him say, like, catch Borderlands fever, because that's just a stupid thing that I felt like he should say. But otherwise, the rest of that was all Mike, and including that subplot idea, which I think was brilliant. Irritatingly, when that game came out, I saw a lot of reviews being like, look, I know you don't want to get the game because Claptrap's in it, but guess what? He's not an irritating piece of shit in this game. And I was like, fucking damn it. One fucking time I don't, but.
Would you say there's a difference in the writing process between writing for narrative and writing for comedy?
What do you mean narrative? Like in terms of like just basic story beats that are? No, because like I was saying earlier, I try to combine them as much as possible. Pretty much. Yeah, you had your hand up before, right?
I had noticed that there was some controversy about Tina's dialogue,
Mhm.
and I was wondering how you responded to that.
I responded to it by basically saying like, hey, if she's actually ends up being racist, I will change her, because I totally don't want to exclude people and make people feel uncomfortable. I want Borderlands to be as inclusive a game as is possible. And then weirdly, me saying that was the thing that got reported on, so it made it seem like there was this huge contingent of people when it was like 2 guys saying that like, hey, Tina's kind of racist. I ended up in a place where I felt like I don't feel like she's racist. I feel like she is, I'm not crazy necessarily. I mean, she is crazy, but like the things that she says that people point out as racist, her saying things like badonkadonk or her quoting rap lyrics and stuff like that, like I think it's kind of restricting to say that only people of color can say that, which I am a person of color and Ash is a person of color, so that's weird anyway. To me, the thing was I should have had her borrow more from all cultures. Like I had her particularly borrow from urban culture, because that was just the stuff that jumped out to me the most. Like I think it would be really cool if Tina said, Shorty, you the best, you the best, because I love that line of dialogue. That's just a really great line from a Drake song. I should have had her do even more of what she does a little bit of in the main game, which is she sometimes talks like a Jane Austen character. She sometimes talks like she's in a fairy tale. She sometimes, goes into Japanese. Like I should have had that be a constant, omnipresent part of her character rather than just like making the urban stuff be the forefront, because it's, for some reason, two people jump onto it and say like, oh, you're making fun of the way that like black people talk, and that was totally not my intention, and I don't. Kinda, yeah. The idea for Tina was that her parents died in front of her, so she doesn't have someone to really raise her, so she's taken everything around her as an influence as to who she should be, from hip-hop music to just random people she meets to like Jane Austen novels she reads to Japanese anime, all that kind of stuff. She's just trying to find an identity for herself by looking at all these other media. That was the idea. A little bit, yeah.
Well, there's been a lot of psycho fans around her, so.
Yeah.
Recently in the game industry, games, especially, almost exclusively AAA games, have cost an exorbitant amount of money to create, and it's kind of also caused kind of like watering down where you're getting multiplayer and Tomb Raider and Ubisoft coming out saying they won't make a game unless it has the potential for a sequel. I mean, what do you think will be the point where game companies, the AAA game companies, will be able to step back and say, okay, this is not working anymore?
I honestly don't know. I mean, like you said, games are costing more and more. It's getting harder and harder. At some point, that bubble might burst. We might find people saying like, oh shit, we need to start like we used to have middle class games where you could go crazy big budget or crazy low budget, or you could go something that's kind of in the middle, kind of your Max Paynes or whatever. Like Max Payne 1 was kind of like a middle budget game, I guess. That's sort of disappearing, and now you kind of have to go indie or go huge. And maybe the wider apart those get, that you might find people going, oh fuck, we need to like actually, something will crash. I don't know. I would have to be a business guy to know that. All I know is that you should probably just go indie. Indie's pretty awesome. Or you should work for a AAA company like Gearbox that just like has the personality of an indie dev. Like, I don't think you could go to Ubisoft and have a butt stallion joke end up in the final game. You, far in the back, yeah.
I know some of your missions are kind of based around pop culture.
Mhm.
What all are they based on?
Sorry?
Like, some of your mission names are based on other
Yeah.
games? What all is that based on?
Me just trying to find a quirky name for a mission that stands out. I could call this the mission where you rescue Roland from the dam, or I could call it a dam find rescue with a pun. Like, just something to make it stand out.
In Borderlands 2, there's a poster that says, who was he? He can be rebuilt.
Oh, Rich Fleeter?
Restore, yeah, Rich Fleeter.
Yeah, Rich Fleeter is a guy that works on our art team, and our art team just thought it would be funny to like do that. So bizarrely, amongst all of our heavy line art, cell shaded types, it's not cell shaded, but like all of our art style, there's just a photorealistic picture of Rich Fleeter wearing a top hat, just because they thought it would be funny.
Well, this goes back to like the tropes and Tiny Tina thing. Do you see a conflict with like making comedy games? Because it seems like there's been a steer toward games have to be serious or more serious.
Yeah, it's kind of what I was saying in the talk of like, oh shit, is it scary to be in a comedy? Do you feel less badass? Does that mean people are going to want to play your game less and less? But if the sales for Borderlands 2 are any sign, people seem to be okay with comedy. They're cool taking that along with their super badass shoot 'em up gameplay that Borderlands offers. So at least for right now, I'm pretty good.
So you're a writer / lover of comedy.
Writer.
I'd be interested to know if you'd ever like written or considered writing like for stand-up.
For stand-up?
Yeah.
No, I don't have the charisma for that, I don't think. Like, I can't. There's something about the way stand-up dudes just like go out and go, I'm going to tell a joke now, and then they just start telling jokes, and it's not even surprising. Like, they're going to tell jokes, and then it just comes out and is hilarious if you're like Louis C.K. or awful if you're Dane Cook. And like, I just don't know how to do that. It's just not the way I'm wired.
You can't ad-lib or improvise?
No, I'm not very good at that. It's a big day.
So you said earlier that you
I'm nobody.
for Mass Effect, which I assume means that you played it.
Nah. I just saw the box art and I was like, oh my god! There's a 3 on it.
In regards to the ending, which side of the fence did you stand on?
Which color? Red.
Green. I was green. I chose green. Yeah, I really liked what they did with the extended cut. Like, I got to say goodbye to Tali, which really mattered to me. Like, to me, the thing that made that series work was the relationships between the characters. I thought it was a little bit weird that you sort of did so much of it alone. So I was really happy that I could say goodbye to Tali and see her, put my name on the thing. So I was pretty happy with where it ended up. That was such a hard. I do not envy the writers for having to end a 3-game series while making the player feel like all their choices mattered and stuff. I mean, really what's amazing to me about Mass Effect 3 is like, it's the only 3rd game in a series I can think of, and correct me if I'm wrong, that is good. Like, Uncharted 3 is probably one of the weaker Uncharteds. Like, Mass Effect 3 is maybe one of the best Mass Effects, and it actually wraps up everything beautifully and takes all those narrative things and isn't this enormous, kick in the balls. Like, Diablo 3 is kind of weaker than Diablo 2. Like, it's actually a good 3rd game in a series and wraps up all these incredibly different and complicated plot threads, so I commend them for that. Jak 3, really? Far Cry 2, not Far Cry 3. Far Cry 2 for life. All right. I'm wrong, fuck. Sorry.
When you're writing a story, do you try to think of the ending before you really, when you start with your story, you try to go with the end and build up to it?
Yeah, but the ending changes through development. Yeah. The original ending of Borderlands 2 was going to be, the idea was that Jak was going to try to kill you publicly in his arena. Again, remember, there was the arena idea. He was going to kill you publicly in the arena while a bunch of people all across the universe were watching him. And everybody would call him a hero for killing the horrible villain that killed his daughter. And the idea was that you were going to try to upload this virus to like turn off all the cameras so you could kill him and he couldn't make himself a martyr. Like for him, it was a win-win. He either kills you and he's awesome, or you kill him and he's a martyr and everybody tries to come after you and kill you. The ending I had in mind was that you would try to upload this virus to shut down the cameras, but he would stop it and you'd go like, well, fuck, I guess I just have to kill him and make him a martyr then, god damn it. And you killed him, and like you'd hear the audience like they're cheering and cheering and cheering, and then you kill him and then they all go quiet. And you're just like, oh fuck, is everybody gonna like be really pissed at me? Are they gonna send hitmen to come and kill me? What's going on? And then everybody just fucking cheers because they just like violence and they don't even fucking care. And for a long time that was the ending I wanted, but then just things changed, so I had to be fluid. Again, if you've asked the question, please don't raise your hand because I'll, yeah. Sure, you, sure. I'll get you next. You ruined his day, it's no big deal. Yes?
How would you prevent the story from taking over the actual gameplay?
Basically just by not doing that. It's actually really easy to avoid doing that if you just know that's your goal. Like the easy way to fall into it, I guess, would just be to write too much dialogue and to make really long spans of dialogue that don't justify, that the space doesn't justify. So a lot of what the writing I did was like, okay, we have from here, this checkpoint, to here, this objective. That means I have this much area to fill with dialogue. If I wrote dialogue to cover this area, then that would be shitty, and we would have to like arbitrarily gate you and have a door that's closed and it won't open until my stupid ass monologue is finished, and then you can go through. But like, I just try to keep my dialogue as concise as possible within those constraints. So yeah, now you.
Going back to the Era Nexus question, how hard did you find it to balance this dramatic tone and the upbeat comedic tone?
Really hard. I still don't know if I actually got the ratio correct, because you can go and watch Roll and Die and then go do a quest about like shooting a guy in the face. And there are a couple of reviewers that called out like, this game is really tonally inconsistent. Like you're just doing really goofy shit and you're doing really serious shit. And part of me is like, yeah, fuck, maybe that should be more consistent. The other part of me is like, yeah, that'd be kind of boring, wouldn't it? Like you kind of don't know what to expect ideally from moment to moment in Borderlands, and I kind of like that unpredictability, but it's something nobody else is doing.
And is there a game that comes to mind that does that successfully or fails miserably at either?
Portal does a pretty damn good job. Portal 2 does a pretty damn good job of like trying to balance like, maybe not, I don't know. They don't go that serious with the GLaDOS stuff, and the Caroline stuff didn't hit as well as the other stuff did. I don't know. Most of the games I play that I really like Saints Row 4, just goes full bore into the like, fuck it, we're just being crazy. Your hand is still up, you. Yeah.
Oh, how was the transition for writing from that game review rejection for the game?
It was really scary because you have this long list of things that are on a website where you're saying, this game sucks, and this game sucks, and I could do better than this game, and fuck all y'all, and fuck all y'all, and fuck all y'all. And then you get to make a game, and you're like, oh, shit. I didn't expect anybody to call me out on that shit. So that was really, really scary. But the good thing about being a game reviewer for a long time was it gave me the ability to articulate my ideas properly and why I think things worked or didn't work within the realm of game design or game narrative. And they gave me an ability to sort of mature my tastes in a sense. So when I could throw out like, oh, you should do this thing like in BioShock because it did this and did this with the player and it reflected in this way, and then Paul could understand what I was talking about and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Earlier you were talking about that you would go to one of like the game designers and they would come to you and say, hey, I want a Top Gun story, and you would write the Top Gun quest. Like, could you explain more like how that dynamic works?
Yeah, they said, hey, would you write a Top Gun quest? And I said, yeah, and then I did it. That's really as far as I got. Like, it would be, they would say, okay, well, I would say, like, okay, what's the quest? And they were like, I guess, and they would say, I don't know, it should be something Top Gun related, so maybe you should be collecting, like, a thing, like, volleyballs. I was like, yeah, you should be collecting volleyballs and have to, like, destroy their net because they're trying to play volleyball or something, and, like, maybe they come out and there's, like, a dude that looks like Iceman and he's shirtless, and, like, it was just this, it's sort of a spitballing session where you just sort of sit down with them and come up with something that felt appropriate, and you go back and forth from there. Yeah.
What other games have you worked on besides Borderlands 2?
That's it. I did a very small amount of dialogue, like a minuscule amount of dialogue for Duke Nukem Forever, and a super minuscule amount of dialogue for Aliens Colonial Marines. And other than that, I did Borderlands 2 and all the DLC.
I have a question about sound and how it pertains to your job. I'm curious how attached or how linked you are to the actual people who are doing the voice acting. And other than
Very.
that, I'm curious how you're linked to the sound design that goes on in the game. Do you have any part in what kind of sounds they use and how they affect, the comedy vibe that's going on through the game?
Sometimes, when it's really relevant, yeah. Like Claptrap's birthday party, we listened to a bunch of different music until we find music that was like appropriately goofy but also sad enough. So it was like me and the creative director and the audio director just being like, which one of these is the most sad to you, and like finding the right one. When it comes to voice acting, I was really involved in that. I was part of casting. I was there for all the voiceover sessions for the entire game, sort of helping direct and helping give context and stuff like that. So I was definitely well enmeshed in that process.
I remember when one of the early trailers for Borderlands 2 came out, it was all big about dubstep and how there would be a lot of dubstep in the game. And there was some controversy about that. Like, a lot of people liked it, a lot of people didn't like it. And then when the game finally came out, the only bit of dubstep was Claptrap saying, like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Right.
Was that something you did in reaction to the community?
No. It was just mainly the fact that the dubstep trailer happened after a lot of the game had already been done. Like, Mikey just made the dubstep trailer because he likes dubstep. And we were just like, well, there's not any in the game, so I don't know. Like, the trailer says there's some in the game, but there isn't, so.
So there's like 99 points, like,
Yeah,
100% dubstep.
which is technically accurate because there was 0 dubstep in Borderlands 1, so it's an infinity% improvement. But I added that Claptrap thing just to give something that referenced that trailer, because the trailer hit so big that I was like, it feels like we should at least acknowledge this dubstep thing, so I had Claptrap do that. Green Lantern.
Thank you. What was the
Thank you for calling me Green Lantern.
what was the challenge for writing already created characters?
It was a huge challenge.
The original 4, really didn't get the personality out in the first game, but you had to kind of make it somewhat fit.
Yeah. It's pretty much as challenging as you would imagine for something like that. You don't want to write a character in such a way that it feels like it's shitting on your memories of the first game. Even though they were just ciphers, they had something there that made them not just Gordon Freemans. So like Lilith was kind of easy, in my opinion, because Lilith was like, in the first game, she's really mean. She's like really condescending to the other people and she's like, get up, I shouldn't have to carry you when you're reviving people. Like, she's really not a nice person. So I kind of took that and was like, okay, well maybe that comes from a place of arrogance and insecurity, and then tried to like make her cocky, and she says cocky things when you meet her, but then like you find out like, oh, she had this crush on Roland and he didn't like her back, and that made her kind of insecure because she's not socially gifted. Which is really just me, just like, the only person I know how to write is somebody who's not good in social situations, because that's what I am. Roland was the same thing, where it's like the only thing you really get from Roland, like Roland in the first game was actually kind of weird, because in the opening video, like they do the splash screens and they're like, Lilith, Mordecai, and they go to Roland, he does this. He's like, I don't want to fucking, like, I'm stoic. And then you play the game and he's like, critical biatch, like he's like super happy in the game. So I kind of tried to get him into place in Borderlands 2 where he was just like the leader and was like this like stoic samurai guy. But in honesty, Roland in Borderlands 2 just comes off as a Blandy McBlanderson, and that's just my fuck up. Like, I tried to not make him offensive in terms of not being too far in one direction of like I'm really animated all the time, or I'm really like a stoic samurai guy, and he just ends up being a fucking Mary Sue. Brick was easy because he's just raw, and I wrote him like that. Mordecai was like, I just need a hook for him, just something. So like he loves his bird a lot, and he's a drunk. So a lot of people found that irritating. I can understand why, but like I'm going to make him not an alcoholic in the future. So. No, you're the girl.
Me?
Yeah, you.
Why didn't Roland respond? That's what I'm
Next question. So here's my fuck up there. Is when Aerith dies in Final Fantasy VII, spoilers, fucking King Kong falls off the Empire State Building, by the way. Yeah. All right. So when that happens, you spend a half a second wondering, why don't they just use Phoenix Down on her? And then you go, oh, whatever, and like move on. And the reason you do that is because nobody in the story ever says, man, we should really get some Phoenix Down to prevent anybody from dying. Like the main story never acknowledges the existence of this very gamey game mechanic. The problem with Borderlands 2, that I will be regretting for as long as I live, is that I gave cutesy dialogue to the new use system that respawns, and I made a quest that was specifically about killing yourself so that you could respawn. So the narrative acknowledged this gameplay mechanic, and now you're paying attention to it so that when the story kills off a guy, you can't just go, oh, it's a game mechanic, because it's not just a game mechanic. I made it part of the story. So like, I fucked up. I should have just completely separated those, not done the quest, not had any dialogue coming from the new stations or anything like that, and just you would have just been like, oh yeah, it's a game thing, whatever. It's not a real part of their world. Cool hat.
You mentioned that you really liked Handsome Jack because he was a likable character that you also hated his guts. How do you write something like that?
Very scared. You do that while nervously biting your nails and hoping that it'll work out. Really, the most useful thing for me about that was the feedback from our focus testers. Because again, like I said, he's the linchpin of the game. If he doesn't work, the game doesn't work. And there's a long time where it felt like he's not going to work. He's too, like there was a period of time where in the third act, he was just too silly all the time. He was still cracking jokes all the time. He didn't feel like he'd lost anything when Angel died. So talking to dudes like Mikey Newman or Paul Hellquist, they were like, I think we could take this down a little bit. I think we should actually make him a little bit more serious once that goes on. So a lot of it was either focus feedback from focus testers or just talking to dudes in development once you get some of the dialogue back. Because you basically do dialogue in a couple of different revisions where you're like, all right, here's this version of script, boom, get that all in the game. How does that feel? This part still feels a little bit weird. Let's go back and get pickup recordings. And then you put that in, boom. And then you want to do 3 more, but you only get that extra 1. And it's like, ah, fuck. But way in the back. Yeah. Still be. Yeah.
So what was it like sort of creating a game inside your game already?
It was really fun. It allowed me to basically sort of, my favorite thing about working on that was that it allowed all the Vault Hunters and Tina to exist in a context where they weren't worried about saving the world all the goddamn time, where they could just be themselves and hang out. Like it's a really, to me, I really like Dragon Keep because it's a hangout story. It's like Dazed and Confused or Jackie Brown, where it's like the reason you come to it isn't because of like big epic stories of epicness. It's about like people talking about how, oh, I don't like salad. You don't like salad? Well, and then joking about that and just trying to act the way people act. That was actually more interesting to me than like dragons. Like that was whatever. The core to me of that story is Tina coming to grips with the death of her friends and learning what it is to be friends with these people and what how nerd stuff, playing D&D, playing video games can actually be a good thing, whereas everybody in the world says that it's a shitty thing, and actually like bring you closer to your friends and help you deal with problems and stuff like that.
Have you ever heard of the game Naughty Bear?
Naughty Bear? Yeah, I've heard of it.
Would that game be like an example of trying to mix comedy into your mechanics? It's essentially a teddy bear slasher.
Yeah. To me that was sort of the comedy came from less from their mechanics and more from their aesthetic. Their sort of cosmetic, like that could have been, they could have switched out that gameplay with like, instead of teddy bears, it would be Nazis and the game would pretty much be the same. They kind of tried to get their humor from like, the gameplay is what the gameplay is, but the funniness is that there's this ironic pairing of like cute fuzzy teddy bears with this violent game. Like the gameplay itself wasn't funny, it was that context.
Also, I have stuff to give you. You want that now or later?
Well, let's do it after. Okay. I don't know why you're giving me stuff, but I appreciate it. Write it and then keep writing it until it feels funny. There's really nothing magical about it. It's just like smash your head against the keyboard until something feels good and you don't feel ashamed of it.
You talked earlier about like the disparity between the comedy and characterization types.
Yeah.
So like, how do you feel about
That was what I hoped we would land in. I was hoping that like, specifically like, so for example, Handsome Jack. The whole idea with Handsome Jack was he says some stuff at the beginning of the game. You think, oh, this guy's kind of funny. He's a little bit of an asshole, but he's kind of funny. And then in the middle of the game, he kills Bloodwing. And the hope was that when he kills Bloodwing, that it is so painful in comparison to the funny stuff he was saying earlier that you hate him so bad that you will do whatever you have to do to kill him at the end of the game. That was the hope. I don't know if he succeeded, but I was really hoping that like much like Firefly or like Futurama, that comedy is a really good method of endearing you to characters and making you feel at ease. And when you're in that sort of state of mind, that tragedy can hit you that much harder. That was what I was going for. Some people, I think, felt that we accomplished that, and some people thought that it just came off as this really schizophrenic, like, rah, kind of thing, but I don't know.
How do you feel about like audio log storytelling? I mean, it sort of made sense as System Shock 2, but do you think it's got sort of lazy, like as a sort of a lazier form of storytelling at this point?
A little. I mean, as someone who uses those a lot, yeah, they're a little bit lazy. But at the same time, there's something good about them, which is that they're incredibly easy production-wise. Like, there's just somebody putting a thing in the environment and just the writer doing most of the work. And people actually seem to like them. Like, in terms of, like Borderlands 1, the quests people liked the most were the ones where you're just picking up the voice recorders telling you what happened to Tannis. Like, the quests where you did, like, collected blade flowers or whatever, people didn't like as much. They really liked the one where you picked up the audio logs, which was as easy to implement and gameplay-wise identical to pick up 20 blade flowers, but this time when you pick up a blade flower, you learn something about a character kind of idea.
Given all of the criticism and backlash that people like Penny Arcade have gotten for some of their humor, I was wondering how careful you are to avoid offending people, and if you had to cut anything out of Borderlands 2 because of it.
Yes, I'm trying to be more and more careful of that. I came from the internet, which is where you can be really offensive and whatever, and people just go, ah, it's no big deal. Or if they get offended, then it's like 3 people or whatever. But it's become more and more important to me that I try to be inclusive and try not to just like shit on people just because I think it's funny, because you don't want to be the guy going like, haha, rape survivors, right? Like with the Dick Wolves thing, like that was just shitty and horrible. I hate that, and I don't ever want to be in that position. So there were a couple of jokes that made Scooter come off as a little bit rapey in the game that I cut, where like he had made a joke about how he had taken a girl out for a date, and they had talked about all the normal things like, what are your favorite movies, and what are your favorite sports team, and hey, do you think this rag smells like chloroform? And like, it's like kind of funny, but it's also just mocking rape, and I didn't want to do that. And I was a very different person at the end of the project than at the beginning. I thought like, hey, whatever I have to do to get a laugh, that's cool. By the end, I was saying, no, we got to start cutting that stuff. We got to start cutting anything that feels like it's mocking, you know, victims of real life abuse, because that's just kind of shitty and insensitive.
What has been your personal experience with Gearbox? Because I know most of us are ATech majors. We have to do group projects, and we've all experienced like great projects and as well as bad ones.
I really like working at Gearbox. I think the people I worked with on Borderlands 2 are incredibly talented and super smart, had a really good sense of humor, and that to me is one of the reasons that's really fun to work at Gearbox, because like, oh, you get to write jokes all day long. That's really fun, like kind of. Like writing the jokes is the hard, shitty part of like, oh God, why can't I just be funny on command? The really cool thing is like talking to people and talking out with different jokes and having ideas that they riff off and feeling like you're part of a team. That's the really cool part. And if Gearbox wasn't a fun place to work, then I don't think Borderlands would be as good as it is. If it is good, if you think it's good.
Were there any misconceptions you had going to Gearbox as a reviewer originally that you found out?
Yeah, I thought that everything was way easier in game development than it is. I thought that when something sucked in a game, then it was because the designers were stupid. Like, take, for example, the fact that almost every single game you can think of has a bad ending. Like, not cool, not really appropriate. Apart from The Last of Us and like any Valve game, almost all games have just shitty ass, like, tacked on, really sudden, weird, arbitrary endings. I was like, well, it's just fucking storytellers being lazy and shit at their jobs. In reality, it almost always comes down to issues of resources or time. They know, and by they I mean every game developer knows, that most people don't finish their games. If you get a 20% completion rate for your game, you're in an amazing spot, which is what Borderlands has, is about 20%, about 1 in 5 people who play our game finish it. If you want to make your ending as big and cool and climactic and awesome as it should be, as endings should be in my opinion, like the ending is the most important part of the story in my opinion, then you're going to want to put a lot of money toward that, and a lot of manpower. But are you really going to put all that manpower towards something that only 1 in 5 people is going to see? Why not put all that manpower toward making sure that the rest of the game is good, or the beginning of the game is good, that everybody's going to see, or that kind of a thing? So that's finding out in lessons like that about how production works and how resources work was the biggest misconception that sort of got blown away by me. Like now when I play a game and I see something that sucks, I know that it's not because the people who made it are dumb. They know that sucks as well, but they made a very specific choice that I would rather have that suck than this other thing that's way more important.
So, how do you approach the joke that everyone expects you to make when you run into a situation and you feel like, oh wow, that's a joke that goes there, and everyone's going to think that goes there? How do you approach it?
I just don't do it. If it's obvious, then it's not going to be funny. Like, it's the Laurel and Hardy thing I talked about before. The reason we expect jokes is because other people make those jokes. Like, take my wife, please. Like, there's moments you could do a stupid joke like that, but if you do that, then you haven't actually made anybody laugh. You just have sort of shown that, like, hey, I'm not creative. Here's the thing that you already know.
Writing for video, kind of foundation video, what was the biggest difficulties you had in switching from a linear story to interactive?
Mainly length is one, because Hey Ash, Rich Playing episodes are 90 minutes. Borderlands 2 is 40 hours. Finding something that would sort of keep you going throughout. But again, that's where a lot of my knowledge of games beforehand came from. And the instructional aspect, like I was saying before, everything that everybody says for the most part in Borderlands has to instruct you as to what the next thing to do is. Finding a way to meld that with jokes was kind of tricky.
So, apart from like the sort of rough spots that you see in games, were there any other things that you changed your mind since reviewing games and then coming into making them, like a new insight?
I felt like I should be a lot less mean when I discuss things I don't like. Like I had a video series called Reverence, because my handle was Reverend Anthony, and I would basically I said some really just vitriolic things about, I would say like Assassin's Creed is a piece of fucking shit, just like really hatefully and really meanly talking about how I didn't like this game. And once you've worked at a game developer and realized that like, oh, this isn't made by a faceless group of like people sitting around in a meeting room. These are made by like people with like lives and families and children and emotions. And when you say things like that, you really can hurt those feelings. Like I've worked with people whose feelings have been hurt by poor reviews or by people saying mean things. And it's like, why knowingly do that? Why go out of your way to like shit on something when you know that's going to hurt somebody and it's not actually going to help people make an informed opinion about that game or actually really raise the level of discourse about that game. It's just going to make you feel cool because, yeah, I fucking talk shit about this stuff and I'm going to rant at stuff and I'm going to show that I'm better than it by pooping on it. I just try to be, even when I say negative stuff now, I try to be less hateful about it, except when it comes to Far Cry 3, weirdly, but I try to be less of a dick.
Kind of building on that idea, there's a lot of bias against video game reviewers and critics, and I wonder if part of that is because of the way that many reviewers go towards kind of the reviewing process, in which they break up this piece of art into like all these different segments based on like sound and game design.
Yeah.
As opposed to like say like what Kieran Gillen wrote about like 10 years ago, like new games journalism, and
Yeah.
there's a few websites that are starting to do that, like with Killscreen and people like that, who are actually like kind of looking at it more from like an artistic perspective. Do you think that more critics should kind of do it from that perspective, or do you think that it's even something that needs to be changed?
No, it's definitely something that needs to be changed. When I was at Destructoid, I tried very hard to abolish our 10-point review scale, because I don't believe that you can use an objective scale to determine something subjective like art. Like, what number out of 10 is, I really like this game, but it's incredibly flawed and buggy in a lot of ways, but there's things about it that are so amazing and magical and cool that I really feel like you should play it. But honestly, this game is going to crash a lot. Like, what is that, a 5 out of 10 because every bug moves you down a point? Like, it's arbitrary bullshit, and I hate it. I would love to see. No, I was going to say it's called New Vegas, because that's my favorite RPG. New Vegas is my favorite RPG far and wide, but every time you talk to somebody about it who hasn't played, they're like, I heard that's the game that's like buggy, and that's why they only got an 85 or whatever. It's like, no, fuck it, it doesn't. So to me, the less granular you can be in your reviews, the better. But there's also reviews and criticism. Like, criticism is just going to keep going and being cool, and I think that's getting better and better. When it comes to reviews, if you go to Tom Francis's website, the guy who worked at PC Gamer, he made a game called Gunpoint. He has a really good list of things that you should do when you're reviewing a game, which is like, tell me about the game. Don't start your review with like, which a lot of people do, and this really self-indulgent thing, a lot of reviewers do it, and I fucking hate it, which is like, when I was 7 years old, my mom, and they put it in this context of like, it's all about me, the reviewer, and Mike, and I'm super cool, and I'm the thing that matters. It's like, no, talk about what it's like to play the game, and what emotions that made you feel, and what situations you got put into. And like, Tom Francis has this really cool, long thing that he does when he's talking about like Deus Ex. It's like, here's just a series of fucked up things that happened to me while I was playing Deus Ex, and I screwed this up, and blah, 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 and it put me in the situation. It was really funny. And he tells you sort of what it's like. It's the new games journalism thing of like, I'm a tourist in this world, and I'm sort of trying to show you, here's what the possibility space is, and here's what it's like to play this stuff. That to me is more interesting than breaking a game down into graphics, sound, gameplay. Like, why is gameplay its own object? It's like, that's the whole fucking thing is the gameplay. What are you talking about? That's dumb. So I would love to see more game reviews like Rock, Paper, Shotguns, where they just say, here's what I think of the game. I'm not telling you whether you need to get it or not. I'm just saying this is what I feel about the game. I'm not putting a fucking number on it. Just read. Learn how to read. Like, that's cool.
Building off there too again, this is sort of a long-winded question, but me, who may or may not be the exception to this group, who is not particularly looking forward to going into game development, except for maybe in the distant future as a writer, who is looking forward to going into games journalism. You said that once you graduated college, you immediately went into Destructoid.
To Gearbox. I was doing Destructoid stuff all throughout high school, or maybe not high school, but all throughout college and maybe some of high school.
So, as you were a freelance critic for Destructoid?
Yeah.
Okay, and what would be, just the first part of this question, what would be the sort of most memorably difficult and most memorably enjoyable things that you, experiences that you had writing for Destructoid?
Memorably difficult was just commenters being dicks. Memorably enjoyable was meeting the dudes I worked with and people from the community that weren't dicks at like Destructoid meetups or PAX or something like that. To the meeting people in person that you've only sort of known online is really, really cool. Oh, wait, no. The most enjoyable one would be fucking meeting my wife. Yeah, she was a... She had her own community blog on Destructoid for a while, and then she got promoted to being a features writer at Destructoid. And the reason she joined that is because she listened to the podcast that I hosted on Destructoid and really liked me, and like we started talking over chat, and then she came down to Arizona, and we dated for a little while, and then got married. And like for me, like, holy shit, I got to write about Shadow of the Colossus and have sex with a lady. Yay. I'm just joking. We've never had sex.
And then the second part of the question is, I have to say that through my years of ruminating about this, I entirely agree with you in terms of the point scale being just entirely flawed as a system critique, and it being the fact that it defeats objectivity in the sense that it degrades both the developer's ability to make the game as well as the writer's ability to write about it.
Yeah, people will get fired sometimes over Metacritic scores.
Yeah,
That's fucked up.
The whole issue with that being, what would you recommend going forward for an aspiring critic to sort of...
Read a lot of Rock, Paper, Shotgun and do pretty much what they do. Read Rock, Paper, Shotgun and Eurogamer and PC Gamer. That to me is the really interesting kind of games writing.
Okay.
Anybody who hasn't asked a question? You.
All right.
I'll get you next.
Based on, you said earlier that you were involved in the voice casting for Borderlands 2.
Yeah.
Were there any really good voice actors that you got to turn down?
Yeah, but it would be unprofessional to say their names. Sorry.
Did you meet anyone cool, I guess?
I didn't get to meet any of them because they sent their auditions in remotely. But yeah, there were a couple of people that yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask
Not you. Sorry. Calm the fuck down.
How do I get your job?
Find something to blackmail me with, I guess. Or murder me. So how to get my job? In order, make something of your own that showcases your talent and your tastes. Like for me, it was my web series. Try to get that as popular as you can. Try to be true to yourself and the things that you find interesting. Make something that expresses yourself that you enjoy making. Don't make it just as a resume. Be incredibly lucky. And go to, which is tied into the third one, which is go to events like Game Developers Conference or PAX or places where you can meet people and act like a lot. The thing that fucks with me is when people go to something like GDC and they go there to network, capital N network. And you can always tell when somebody's coming at you to capital N network because they come off like a capital R robot. They just are doing weird shit like trying to invite themselves along with you and trying to hang out with you, but they're like, oh, I'm just really excited about these projects and I'm so good at these things. And it feels like a living resume is talking to you. The reason I got the job at Gearbox specifically was I was at GDC covering it for Destructoid, just going to sessions and stuff like that, and I met Mikey Newman, who wrote the first Borderlands game, and he kept trying to hang out with me, and I honestly thought he might have been hitting on me because he kept trying to hang out with me, and I was just like being myself and just be like, yeah, this is jokes, and here's some things I think about games, and blah, 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 and Hey Ash is the thing I work on. And I didn't realize it at the time, but he was actually covertly basically interviewing me for the job of being writer for Borderlands 2. So after I got home, he'd sent me a message on LinkedIn that was like, hey, do you want to write Borderlands 2? I was like, yes, I would. So yeah, it was a mixture of like sort of knowing the right people, being in the right place at the right time, and having a thing that I didn't have to send him a resume. Well, I did, but it wasn't the important thing like sending him the resume. It was he could look at the entire roster of Hey Ash, which playing videos I did, and basically just show that. The way he tells it, he went around showing people like, look at this fucking episode about being colorblind. It's so funny, and like he clearly likes games and all this shit. So that or murder me. I don't know. Please don't murder me. All right, sorry. No, sorry. The guy told to shut up. Sorry, you first, and then you.
So I was just gonna ask what you're working on right now that you can talk about. Like, what are you writing for? Is it Hey Ash Season 5 maybe?
Yeah, I'm writing for Hey Ash Season 5. I'm writing for a bunch of stuff I can't talk about. And then I'm writing for the Borderlands DLC that's coming out. We've got like these things called the Headhunter packs that are like this little map and then a boss fight at the end. There's just, I've written for those, so. The stuff I can't talk about is fucking sick.
Of like indie developers and indie gaming, and based on your response from the not the previous question but the one before that, do you think like forming your own little creative team and making indie games is a good way to get into the gaming industry and maybe getting picked up by a bigger company later on?
Yeah, but I think also it's completely viable to not have your goal be an indie so you can get picked up by AAA and go work AAA. Like it's totally cool to be indie and just stay indie. Like a lot of people like, so I found recently that there's Gone Home, there's Card Hunter, there is Eldritch, and there's The Novelist. And those are 4 games that are all indie games that are really, really cool that are made by people who used to work on a BioShock game. Like they went to AAA, did that for a while, went, and then became indie and then took all their expertise and made something really cool with indie games and basically made a living for themselves or will make a living for themselves. There's never been a better time to be an indie, in my opinion, because there is a pretty clear correlation between like, if you make a really high quality, really polished indie game, your Spy Parties, your Braids, your Super Meat Boys, your Fezzes, you can actually make money doing that. You can actually justify the costs of what you did. And I don't know if that's ever been true before the advent of Steam and the explosion of indie games, but I think going indie is a really, really viable way to go.
Especially with Kickstarter.
Yeah, but that might pop soon, I don't know, but yeah.
Somebody else who really likes New Vegas, could you just talk about some of the things it did really well and maybe convince some of these people to give it a chance?
Sure. So one of the things I really loved about New Vegas was, the non-linearity. Like you can get to New Vegas. You can either do all the plot missions that send you around the outside of the map to get to New Vegas eventually, or you can just go fuck it and just run past Deathclaws and get to New Vegas immediately. Like the freedom you have in that game is amazing. You can get through the entire game without killing anyone, which is something I loved about the original Fallout that Fallout 3 didn't have. Like I basically did my Doctor Who run of New Vegas where I was all hacking in charisma, and anytime anybody shot at me, I just was like, no, and just fucking running past them and shit. And that was super fun. And the writing is impeccable. Like it's so funny and it's so smart. And the story isn't about like you have to find your dad or the world will end and there's a big robot that's gonna like it's not about this really epic big time shit. It's just like there's a city, there's a dam. This is of military importance to a lot of different factions. Which faction do you think should end up winning? It's this really more what's the word I'm looking for? Personal story rather than about saving the world. It's about just this city and the fate of this city, which I really liked. And there's a bot called Fisto that you can have sex with.
Personally, as a writer myself, I often brainstorm and reiterate on any given idea, trying to push it to perfection, but I never actually finalize it. How do you balance perfection and the goal?
Deadlines do that. It's basically when you can't work on it anymore, then I guess it's good.
Do you ever continue, like hold on to an idea and you say like, hey, I might be able to use this
Yeah, if there's something that I can't do, I have several lists of Borderlands 2 that I'm not going to tell you because I'm going to use them later. But like, there's several things that I was like, oh, this is such a fucking good idea, but it's just not going to fit for whatever reason. So whatever, it'll go back into my back pocket, and then later I can try to ride my own coattails for the ideas I've had now, because in 10 years I'm going to be a talentless piece of shit. So I'll just use these ideas I had from when I was 25 and do that.
Going off the same concept of ideas being recycled, do you find it difficult to avoid seeming derivative of other jokes, other games, and the things that you like that?
Yeah, that's just the process of trying to be creative. Is like Pixar has this thing, they have these mantras of story design, and one of them is like, don't use your first idea, or your second, or your third, or your fourth, or your fifth. Like, keep going until you find something that's different that people like. John Cleese also says this about creativity, is that when he wrote for Monty Python, he wrote sketches that were better than another person on Monty Python, who he felt was a much more creative and much more intelligent person than him. And the reason that his sketches turned out better than the smarter person's is because the other guy would get to an idea that he thought was pretty good, and then he would just write that sketch. And John Cleese would sit on that for a really long time until he felt like, all right, no, I got to throw that away. But what if I'll throw that away. And then he got to something that was different and new, and then he started writing his sketch. So.
What are some of your more favorite obscure games or games you just haven't talked about at all today?
Gunpoint, everybody should play Gunpoint. Spelunky is amazing. Eldritch is coming out, that's amazing. Dark Souls is fantastic. Payday 2 is pretty cool. Fallout New Vegas. Far Cry 2 is my favorite game, probably ever. If you permadeath run Far Cry 2, it's so fun. If you find Far Cry 2 fun, which like there's 8 of us that do, but we really love it. I was kind of okay on Bastion. I liked it, but there was a lot of the story beats that came in were coming in when I was like, I did that. I love the design of the gameplay where you could like crank up the difficulty and get bonuses based on that. But I got to the point where I cranked up the difficulty enough that I was going, ah, the entire time I was playing and focusing on that, and I couldn't listen to like, the kid was doing this thing and it's really important to the story. So I ended up kind of missing on a lot of the nuance in the story.
Have you played Transistor?
No, I haven't yet. I want to. No, it's not, but he was talking about like cons or whatever. Yeah, no, not yet. That's good. Yeah, Dear Esther, Proteus, Gone Home. Papers, Please. I talked about Papers, Please. Fuck it. This is a really good year for games.
Are there any writers you look up to outside of gaming?
Yeah, Louis C.K. I really look up to. Dashiell Hammett, because he's really good at just being straight and to the point and getting you what you need to know. P.G. Woodhouse and Douglas Adams, because of the way they can turn phrase. Or even Hugh Laurie is really good at doing that. If you read his book, The Gunsiller, it's basically like, what if Woodhouse did a spy novel, and it's really, really good. Neil Gaiman is a huge one too, because everything he does, and Alan Moore, everything they do just feels like they took something that you've seen 100 million times and did what I was talking about before, where they just keep thinking on it and keep thinking on it until they take this thing that you thought you knew, every cliche that could possibly be associated with it, and then they come up with something completely new that blows your mind. Like, I think they're amazing. I haven't read enough Terry Pratchett. I've read the first few Discworld books, which everybody who reads Discworld says, oh, those are the shitty ones. So I need to get past the shitty ones to the good stuff, but I hear he's good. I think it's anything that can get more money into the hands of indies is good. I think some people are perverting it, but I don't know. I like it.
Earlier you talked about games where the humor comes purely from the gameplay, like Surgeon Simulator and Quap. Have you played Octodad?
Yes. Yes, same exact thing. Octodad's fucking amazing. I'm really looking forward to Dadley's Catch coming out. Anybody who hasn't played Octodad, it's a game where you're controlling an octopus that's trying to get along as a mild-mannered dad. Like, his family doesn't know he's an octopus. He's just an octopus in a suit. And you're trying to convince your family you love them and do things to like make their lives better while being an octopus. And there's like a suspicion meter where it's like, make breakfast for your kids. And you're like, okay. And like slapping across all this shit. And they're getting more and more suspicious. Like, I think he might be an octopus. Like, it's super funny.
In the same vein as like weird game mechanics like Octodad, there's recently, speaking about the Oculus Rift again, there's a game that was made at one of the game jams recently where you are an elephant and you have a nose that's in front of your face and you move your head to move it. You get points for just like knocking buildings over.
That's cool.
Which just seems like a really interesting thing to do.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was talking about before, where it's like finding new types of gameplay that are inherently funny would be the future of interactive comedy for me. So, it's coming up on 9, so I think I'll take like 2 more questions. If you haven't asked a question yet, I would like to answer your question rather than some of these. All right, so you 2 dudes right here, and then we'll be done. So first you.
Before you got hired at a company that has a marketing department, how did you get your work
I was very lucky in that I worked for Destructoid and already had an established readership there to show, hey Ash, what you playing? Destructoid had pretty good circulation then, still does, probably even better now. So I got a lot of eyes on it by posting it to Destructoid, and then enough people saw it that Nero, or Yanier Gonzalez, the guy who runs Destructoid, is a really nice, cool guy, talked to a dude at Game Trailers and tried to get me a gig there and succeeded. And then we actually started getting paid for Hey Ash, What You Playing? That was amazing. So it was being connected to that blog that made that happen. And then who's the other guy? Yeah, you.
I guess it's kind of two parts. First of all, I'm really shitty at games, so like I'm just wondering if there's anything like fitting the difficulty down to easy, like you think that takes away from like the story or the immersion?
No, I think that's a really good argument for the ludonarrative or not the ludonarrative. It's not even ludonarrative dissonance, really. It's story and gameplay inherently work against one another. I like stories in games. I write stories in games, but I have to also acknowledge that it's kind of trying to make a round peg fit in a square hole. Stories are about withholding information until it's absolutely the right time to give it. Stories are about very properly setting things and pacing things and controlling things. And gameplay is about a fucking octopus knocking over shit trying to make breakfast for their family. And for me, nothing's more irritating than being in the middle of this awesome scripted action sequence in Mass Effect or Metal Gear or Call of Duty or whatever, and then dying and having all that excitement just dissipate completely, and then being like, okay, I guess I got to do this again. Like, I would really wish that more games had a you cannot possibly die difficulty, because a lot of games are designed not to have the gameplay and the story necessarily go together per se, but like to have the experience of like playing a Call of Duty game is like playing a really good, not good, Michael Bay movie, where it's just like the music's going off and everything's fucking really intense and like all explosions just are going off, and like to have all that all of a sudden stop and you have to do that again is going against the intent of their basic sort of aesthetic. So I wish more games had a super easy, like you can't possibly die and if you click everything on the screen dies mode for just like Dara O'Brien has a really good stand-up bit about this, about how like when you're reading a book by Emily Dickinson, you don't get to the end of the first chapter, and the book goes, what are the major themes of this book? And you go, I don't really know, I wasn't paying attention. The book goes, boom, and then it closes. And so, like, video games are the only art form that punish you for being bad at them, which is weird when they have all these other elements like narrative that aren't actually connected to the gameplay that you would still want to go see. Like again, right now I'm playing Amnesia Machine for Pigs, and I can't get any further in it and find out what their story is because I can't find the 3 little widgets I have to manipulate in the first room. But yeah, that's probably, I'm tired now, so we'll be done with questions. But
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you all for coming. So thank you all for coming very much.